Chapter 533. Even the two shamans couldn't stay calm when they heard the name, let alone Zheng Luo, who was standing in front of Robber 7. That was why when Robber 7 said the name, Zheng Luo couldn't hide the shock and excitement in his eyes. At the same time, the people who spoke were no better than Zheng Luo and the rest. Robber 7 wanted to see the Yinjiao people's confused expressions, not what. So it's them. Obviously, they already knew about it. Didn't they say that other than the people of Rock Hill City, no one else knew about it? Even the arrogant slave masters in the desert, other than the Shi family in Rock Hill City, no one else knew about it, let alone the tribesmen outside the desert. How did the Yinjiao people know about it? Robber 7 was bewildered. Xiao Xian didn't expect Robber 7 to give such an answer. If they didn't believe that Yinjiao people who knew about the green-faced fanged beast wouldn't leak information, they would have suspected that there was a spy. Xiao Xian found out about the green-faced fanged beast from Gongjiaheng. Then, how did the Shi family in Rock Hill City know about it? If they knew, why didn't they send people to search for it? The Shi family never looked for the green-faced fanged beast before, asked Xiao Xian. Robber 7 recovered from his shock. He thought about it and decided not to hide it. He couldn't put himself in an advantageous position. The Yinjiao people knew more than he expected. Now, he could only use more information in exchange for Yinjiao's promise. Actually, the Shi family in Rock Hill City had sent people to search for it a long time ago, but they couldn't find it. Rock Hill City used to be the city that sent the most slaves out of all the desert cities. But because there were other people in the desert, Rock Hill City didn't want to make a big deal out of it, said Robber 7. Xiao Xian remembered a long time ago, where he first met Shi Shu. There was a slave stronghold there, and Rock Hill City definitely had more than one stronghold outside the desert. He used to think that they were just recruiting slaves and expanding their army. Now that he thought about it, they might be looking for the green-faced fanged beasts. Before Yan Jiao came to the fearsome beast mountain forest, other people rarely came. Naturally, they didn't notice anyone entering the forest. When Yan Jiao came back, it happened to be a few years before Rock Tomb City planned to unify the desert. They didn't have time to care about the fearsome beast mountain forest, so they didn't see anyone entering the mountain. Besides, the ferocious beast mountain forest was huge. Even if the Yinjiao hunted, it was impossible for them to travel through the entire ferocious beast mountain forest. It was possible that no one else had entered the forest. Now that the situation in the desert had been settled, the other side once again began to act without any scruples. However, Xiao Xian felt that Rock Hill City's operation this time was a little too rushed. Green-faced fanged beast, what does it look like? Zheng Luo and Ao's breathing quickened. Ever since they found out that the green-faced fanged beast's blood could be used to forge good weapons, they had been thinking about it. Unfortunately, they couldn't find it. If they could get more detailed information about the green-faced fanged beast, it would be easier for them to find it. Robber 7 didn't show it on his face, but he was already thinking about it. So the Yinjiao people didn't know what the green-faced fanged beast looked like. Instead of looking for it himself, why not tell the Yinjiao people and let the Yinjiao people go through the trouble? Then when they found it, he could steal it himself. Robber 7 thought to himself. It was said that once the scar was healed, one would forget the pain. This person was still tied up and he was already thinking about how to steal the next time. I've seen a drawing and memorized it, but my hands are tied up. How can I draw it for you? Robber 7 lifted his chin and pointed at the straw rope that tied him up. This kind of rope was too strong. The more he struggled, the tighter it became. It was a terrible feeling to be unable to move. Zheng Luo looked at the two shamans. Seeing that they nodded, he went over and untied the vines around Robber 7's arms. Xiao Xian took out a leaf that was half the width of his arm and handed it over with the beast ink brush and paint. He had already prepared this beforehand. He originally planned to pry something useful out of Robber 7's mouth. He didn't expect Robber 7 to have no intention of hiding anything and even brought such a surprise. Robber 7 loosened his grip and asked Zheng Luo to untie the vines around his legs. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to draw well in this uncomfortable position. After some thought, Zheng Luo tied Robber Seven's legs. This time, he didn't tie them up in the shape of the Chinese character or fasten them to a wooden stake. Instead, he made him sit on the ground. Draw properly. Ao's patience with this bandit was running out. He felt that Robber Seven was too cunning and couldn't be trusted. If it wasn't for the shaman's promise not to kill him, he would have chopped him down with his axe. Robber Seven ignored Ao's murderous aura. He knew that the two elders in the house were of high status, but he didn't understand why there were two shamans in Yanjiao. No matter what, since the two shamans in Yanjiao promised to let him go, as long as the information he provided was worth it, the two elders would definitely keep their promise. Hence, he wasn't in a hurry. Robber Seven twisted his wrist and frowned. When he moved his arm, he could still hear the bones in his body creaking. The beating he received last night was too heavy. One of his arms was fractured and he couldn't draw, so he could only use the other. Enduring the pain, Robber Seven picked up the brush and dipped it in paint. He recalled the painting that he had seen before and started to paint it one stroke at a time in a serious manner. For the sake of his own escape and for Yanjiao to find the item as soon as possible, he didn't intend to play any tricks. He was still waiting for Yanjiao to find the item so that he could steal it and trade it with the Shi family in the desert for something better. However, as Robber Seven drew, he stared at the two leaders with wide eyes. Their expressions were getting worse and worse. "All right, I'm done." Robber Seven looked at the result of his drawing and nodded in satisfaction. Just as he was about to continue negotiating, he raised his head and saw the two people standing beside him with dark faces. Whoosh, the two leaders attacked almost simultaneously. One held a knife and the other an axe. They came at Robber Seven from each side. "Wait!" Robber Seven quickly shouted. He was injured and couldn't dodge easily. He didn't understand why the two had such a reaction. He was anxious. The tip of the knife and the axe were on both sides of Robber Seven's neck. In the next moment, his head would be separated from his body. No matter how calm a robber was, under such a murderous attack, he couldn't stay calm. "You Yanjiao broke your promise. How can you go back on your words? How can you face your totems? We didn't keep our promise. Why don't you take a look at what you've drawn? How dare you fool us?" Ao held his breath. His nostrils flared and his hot breath came out like an angry bull. "When did I fool you?" Robber Seven was furious. He had drawn exactly the same. "The drawing I saw was exactly like this. I swear on my name as a thief." Robber Seven straightened his neck, his face full of dissatisfaction. "How dare you accuse me of drawing so well? You don't know how to appreciate it. Yanjiao people are really vulgar. They're just like those small tribesmen living in the border areas." Both sides were red in the face and neck as they confronted each other. The shaman, who was sitting on the side, coughed awkwardly and signaled Ao and Zheng Luo to put down their knives and axes. She then looked at the drawing that Xiao Xian handed over. Ao wanted to say something, but the shaman gave him a look. Ao didn't understand at first, but after calming down and thinking about it, he understood. He couldn't help but blink a few times. Xiao Xian knew Ao quite well. Ao would only blink uncontrollably when he felt guilty. Xiao Xian also knew what the shaman meant. In fact, Xiao Xian believed Robber Seven when he said that the drawing made up of a few simple lines was the result of absolute seriousness. He didn't intend to fool them at all. Because most of the people here were good at drawing, let alone a drawing that was passed down from 1,000 years ago. There was only one possibility for the people of Rock Hill City to know about the green-faced fanged beast. Someone from the group that came 1,000 years ago knew about it. Therefore, the person who drew the green-faced fanged beast must be someone from 1,000 years ago. Based on this, Robber Seven's words could be trusted. Ao and Zheng Luo understood. If this was a few years ago, they would have drawn the same thing, but not as good as Robber Seven's drawing. However, because of Xiao Xian's drawings, their drawing skills improved a lot, and other drawings weren't good enough for them. Now that they suddenly saw such a simple drawing, they just couldn't accept it. They were too excited just now and were disappointed when they saw Robber Seven's drawing. After calming down, they looked at Robber Seven's drawing seriously. Something that looked like a deer but wasn't a deer, a sheep but wasn't a sheep. Was this the green-faced fanged beast? Ao glanced at the drawing in disgust and said to Robber Seven, "Tell me more about the situation. Who can understand a drawing like this?" On Robber Seven's swollen face, his eyes that were originally squinted into slits widened due to his anger. Looking down on my drawing? However, he had no choice but to lower his head. Robber Seven was still hoping that the other party would fulfill his promise and let him go. He could only take a deep breath, suppress his anger, and tell them what he knew. In fact, Xiao Xian and the others had already heard what Robber Seven said. Green-faced fanged beast, small in size, green in color, thick skin, hooves without horns, sharp fangs growing upwards, fierce in nature, and fond of eating grass. Anything more than that would be gone. That's all? Ao looked at Robber Seven. That's all. Robber Seven saw that Ao's murderous aura was rising again and knew that he wasn't satisfied with what he said. He quickly added, "The person who told us really only said this. However, there was one more thing. He told us that if we really met the green-faced fanged beast, we would know for sure." "The person who showed you the drawing was from the Shi family of Rock Hill City?" Xiao Xian asked. No. It was obvious that Robber Seven didn't want to answer this question. This was the secret of the robbers. Even the most cowardly robbers had their own principles. Some things could be sold out, but some things could never be revealed. "How much did the people of Rock Hill City give you?" Xiao Xian asked again. "If we find the green-faced fanged beast, we can bring it to them in exchange for anything we want." This was something that could still be said. "It seems that you robbers have always been in contact with Rock Hill City. Otherwise, you wouldn't have mobilized so many people at once," Xiao Xian said. Robber Seven pretended to be dead and didn't say anything else. After some questioning, Yan Jiao and the others reluctantly believed Robber Seven's words and kept their promise to let him go. They blindfolded him and threw him out of the forest. They thought that he was severely injured and couldn't walk. However, after landing on the ground, he escaped with the speed of a bird and disappeared from their sight. "I told you he was faking it," Ao said angrily. "Xian. What? The next time you see him, beat him to death." "All right." Chapter 534. Ao, Zheng Luo, and the others couldn't wait any longer after knowing that Rock Hill City's goal was to find the green-faced fanged beast. In their opinion, the green-faced fanged beast was equivalent to a higher-level weapon. With a higher-level weapon, the tribe's combat power would greatly increase. Who wouldn't want to find it? Since the Shi family of Rock Hill City had sent people to Fearsome Beast Forest to search, did it mean that there really was a green-faced fanged beast in Fearsome Beast Forest? Not necessarily. However, if there was a place on this continent where the green-faced fanged beast could be found, it would be Fearsome Beast Forest. There were no other places that were suitable for the beasts to live in. Searching for the green-faced fanged beast was definitely not an easy task. Otherwise, the Shi family of Rock Hill City wouldn't have sent so many people into Fearsome Beast Forest. They even hired robbers, who were good at excavating treasures. Is there really a green-faced fanged beast in Fearsome Beast Forest? After so many years, the people of Rock Hill City still haven't found it, right? Tower said. Not necessarily. Even if they did find it, as long as they don't say anything, no one would know. If there really isn't one, Rock Hill City has existed for almost 1,000 years. Why would they keep an eye on Fearsome Beast Forest? Generations of rulers of Rock Hill City had sent people to search for it. This meant that they had never given up on the forest. If there really wasn't one, why would they be so persistent? Rock Hill City hid too well. If it wasn't for the chaos in the past 2 years, no one would know that Rock Hill City had been brewing a huge conspiracy. no one knew the true strength of Rock Hill City. Perhaps they had even more trump cards up their sleeves that no one knew about. That's true. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go find it. I'll be the first to join. Duo Kong couldn't wait. No rush. Xiao Xian looked in the direction of the tribes outside the forest. Those people haven't been dealt with yet. Since the Hui tribe expressed their intention to cooperate, Yanjiao was naturally willing. No matter how arrogant they were, they didn't think that they could challenge the other tribes at the same time. It was a good thing to form an alliance. Go tell Gula to prepare to enter the forest. Xiao Xian said. What if the other tribes want to go with us? Gigu asked. Then let them show their sincerity. Among the people from the Hui tribe who came to Yanjiao, there were actually two factions. One faction supported abandoning the other tribes and joining forces with Yanjiao, while the other faction believed that Yanjiao was not worth cooperating with. They only had strength and might be a little scheming, but they were far inferior to the other tribes. However, in the end, they still decided to choose Yanjiao. First of all, although they said that they were cooperating with several other tribes, their relationship was not that good. Usually, they did not have close contact with each other. Most of the time, they still needed to inquire about information on their own, so they did not get many benefits. Secondly, they could no longer tolerate those people's overly cautious and hesitant style of doing things. In recent years, the people of the Hui tribe only felt that something big might happen. The shaman of the Hui tribe also predicted that there might be a huge change in the near future. He wasn't sure when, but he was sure it wouldn't be far away. This made the Hui tribe, who lived a peaceful life on the grasslands, unable to remain calm. Something that could affect them was definitely not to be underestimated. Unfortunately, up until now, the progress was really disappointing. They could not wait any longer. On this day, several people of the Hui tribe were arguing about cooperation with Yanjiao. Since Gula went to find Xiao Xian, many days had passed, but Yanjiao still did not give them a satisfactory answer. Some people started to get anxious. Didn't they see that the other tribes were laughing at them? They didn't even want to go out, afraid that once they went out, they would see a circle of mocking faces. Just as they were complaining, Gigu came over. Pack up, we're going into the mountains. Into the mountains? Gula's eyes lit up. When Gigu said go into the mountains, it was definitely not to hunt, but to look for something. Do you already know what you're looking for? She, who was at the side, asked with uncertainty. Gigu did not answer directly, but gave him a meaningful smile. Almost as soon as Gigu left, the people of the other tribes rushed to the Hui tribe's place to ask. When they found out that the Hui tribe was going into the mountains with the Yanjiao people, they could not sit still and went to find the leaders of Yanjiao. They did not believe that the Yanjiao people would know what Rock Hill City was looking for. They only wanted to go with them because they wanted Yanjiao to lead the way. After living outside the mountains for a long time, they would definitely feel uncomfortable after entering the forest. Fearsome Beast Forest would not give them enough time to adapt. If they went in rashly, they would easily lose their lives. As for Yanjiao's sincerity, they also understood that Yanjiao wanted a guide fee. This was easy to negotiate. Thus, the three leaders took the promises of those people and went to find Xiao Xian. A large boat from the Longboat tribe, half a cart of jade from the Mang tribe, half a cart of silk cloth from the Eight Limbs tribe, a strong bow from the Tian Shan tribe. After listening to the three team leaders, Xiao Xian raised his eyebrows. Let them double the original amount. Huh? Not just the three leaders, even the two leaders who had been listening felt that Xiao Xian's demands were too high. Those people might not agree, said Zheng Luo. Disagree? If they don't agree, then scram. Give them 2 days to come up with an answer. Otherwise, let them leave on their own, said Xiao Xian calmly. After some thought, Ao nodded. Let's do that. Those people had been here for so long, did they really think that Yanjiao would tolerate them forever? They thought that Yanjiao cared about them. 2 days later, the three leaders came back with the results of their discussion. The other tribes have all agreed, only the Tian Shan tribe refused. They've already left. Looks like they plan to enter the mountains themselves. Duo Kong felt refreshed when he thought about the other tribes' dark faces. Did they really think that Yanjiao was free? They were just a little late in collecting the fees. Oh, by the way, the people of the Hui tribe said that they would send a batch of good horses from the grassland after this incident. Gue he smiled and said, the people of the Hui tribe are very sincere. The other tribes had already sent people back to prepare things. Other than those who planned to enter the mountains with Yanjiao, they would also leave a few people behind to deliver the promised sincerity. When do we leave? The shaman asked Xiao Xian. 2 days later. The weather is getting weirder, said Xiao Xian as he looked at a flowering tree not far away. The berries of that tree were used to make paint, so when the tribe built houses, they didn't remove them. They had other uses. However, this kind of tree usually only blossoms when it is close to summer. It only bears fruit when the summer is hot. According to normal calculations, it should be almost winter now. But now, in this winter, the weather might be closer to summer. The mountains might be more dangerous than before. The ferocious beasts that had their lives disrupted might be more irritable, so they had to be extra careful. Entering the mountains at this time, they might encounter some dangers that they wouldn't have encountered in the past. They were only going to explore the mountains, but they weren't going to hunt, so they didn't need to bring a lot of people. This time, Xiao Xian planned to only bring 5 people, but with the addition of the other tribes, it would be a lot more. In the fields outside the forest, in the cabbage field, new leaves were growing, and many small cabbages that had been transplanted had also begun to grow spherical leaves. The leaves wrapped around each other. Maybe it was because the land here was large and there was enough fertilizer, but the cabbages changed almost every day and grew very fast. Because of the weather, combined with last year's situation, crops that shouldn't have been planted in winter were now being planted. Xiao Xian's giant fly swatter was also used by the people patrolling the fields. Because metal was too rare, they only made one. The others used similar swatters, but they weren't made of metal. They were made of wood, but the Yanjiao people were too strong, so it was too easy to break them. So, every time they encountered a swarm of insects, the people guarding the fields would rush to use the metal swatter. When the swatter swatted the flying insects, it would swat a bunch of them down. It was very satisfying. In the tribe, life was still the same as before, but many times, people felt like they had just transitioned from spring to summer. Every time they moved, they would sweat profusely. Xiao Xian brought the medicine and other things that he had prepared. This time, the other 4 people who were going into the mountains with him were Duo Kong, Tua, Mai, and Xiang Chen. They were only going to see if there were any green-faced fanged beasts. Maybe they would look for traces of the slaves who entered the mountains to see if they could get more information from them. Compared to the calmness of the Yanjiao people, the people from the other tribes already felt uncomfortable before they even entered the depths of the mountains. The mountains were filled with all kinds of noises and screams. Even the wind that blew carried a sense of danger. Unforeseen danger was even more frightening. However, in order to understand what Rock Hill City, the ruler of the desert, valued, they still had to go in. It wasn't just the Hui tribe. In fact, the other tribes also had a premonition that there might be a huge change in the near future. However, they couldn't predict what it was. They could only try their best to understand all kinds of doubts and find more protection. This was also why they were willing to take out more things in exchange for their companions. Between giving up and getting something, they still had a sense of balance. The scorching sun hung high in the sky. In the mountains, tall trees gathered together. There were no yellow leaves. Even the trees seemed to have lost their original rules of growth. They were lush and thriving, without a sense of desolation. All kinds of flying insects flew between the leaves. There were also pairs of eyes hidden behind the leaves, either vigilant or bloodthirsty. Chu Su and the other 7 Mang tribesmen followed Huang Yi, following the footsteps of the Yanjiao people in front of them. The presence of the surrounding people was too strong. It was difficult for him to ignore them. However, the Yinjiao people said that he didn't need to pay attention to them. As long as he ignored them, they wouldn't take the initiative to attack. However, the Yinjiao people had long been used to this kind of thing, but the others were not. Chu Su couldn't help but look up at a tree that was 10 times thicker than him. There was a figure on the branch. He couldn't see what it was because it was too similar to the color of the bark. If it wasn't for his keen eyesight, Chu Su wouldn't have noticed it. It looked over with undisguised murderous eyes. It bared its fangs, as if it was going to pounce on them in the next moment. Chu Su shuddered and quickly looked away. He didn't look at the eyes on the tree. It seemed that the murderous look in his eyes faded a little. Sure enough, the Yinjiao people were very experienced in dealing with these things. No wonder the elders of the tribe agreed to let the Yinjiao people lead the way instead of going into the mountains themselves. It really saved them a lot of unnecessary trouble. Chapter 535. It was said that a long time ago, most of the tribes lived in the mountains and forests. Later on, some tribes walked out of the mountains and forests in search of a more peaceful place to live. Some tribes, although not migrating, cut down the forests around their living areas. After thousands of years, they were separated from the original mountains and forests, and the former forests could not be seen in their original state. Among the tribes that decided to go into the mountains with the Yinjiao, some had ancestors who left the mountains themselves, such as the Longboat tribe. Others, such as the Feather tribe, had deliberately changed their surroundings. No matter which it was, they hadn't felt it in a long time. Moving in a place like this, isolated from the rest of the world, full of ancient trees, wild grass, fearsome beasts, and poisonous insects, was like returning to the most primitive state of savagery. They were wearing clothes made of finely woven linen and silk cloth, which made them feel particularly out of place as they walked. For the people of the various tribes who had always wanted to leave their barbaric state, this was indeed a very special experience. Looking at the 5 Yinjiao people in front of them, they still looked normal. Although they wore clothes made of cloth, most of them were made of animal skin. Normally, they didn't feel anything special, but after entering the mountains, they could clearly feel the changes in the Yinjiao people. They seemed to have blended into the forest, and there was no sense of awkwardness. It was as if these people were born to belong in the mountains. Rather than saying that they were hunters who were good at surviving in the mountains, it was more accurate to say that they were humanoid beasts that roamed freely. Yes, the people of the various tribes were beginning to feel the beastly nature of the Yinjiao people. Especially after seeing Duo Kong tear apart a beast that had pounced down from a tree with his bare hands, the bloody visual impact was even more intense. It was the most primitive, savage nature. This was the real Yinjiao people. Whoosh! A spear pierced through the small gap between the few people in the group, almost brushing past their clothes. The wind made the cloth flap. The spear's high speed seemed to heat up the air, and it made the fine hairs on the people's faces tremble. Poochie, thud. The sound of a sharp weapon piercing through flesh and the sound of a nail piercing into a tree sounded at almost the same time. The people who thought they were going to be pierced by the spear stiffened and slowly twisted their bodies to look in the direction of the sound. There, a strange-looking animal was waving its bamboo-like limbs, twisting its body as if trying to break free. However, a spear pierced through its neck, nailing it to the tree trunk. Brownish-red blood flowed out of the wound. The grayish-brown animal that looked like a dried leopard gradually slowed down its struggling movements until it stopped moving. Looking at the animal's claws, they were like nails. Many people in the group swallowed their saliva. How did it move when it looked like this? Just now, he didn't even hear much of a commotion. By the time he heard the sound and prepared to defend himself, the spear had already arrived. What is that? Someone from the Feather, it's a normal beast in the mountains. Xiao Xian walked over and pulled out the spear that was nailed to the tree trunk. Don't get scratched by them. They are poisonous. We usually don't eat them. No one asked if they could eat it. Seeing Xiao Xian's incomparably calm reaction, many people in the group were already complaining in their hearts. They already lost their appetite when they saw the beast, let alone eat it. In fact, many people in the group had been to the desert. It was reasonable to say that there were many desert beasts. They had experienced the desert and should have been mentally prepared. But the mountains were different from the desert. Killing people was different from killing beasts. In the desert where the slave owners lived, there were too many dead places. Sometimes there were no living creatures. As long as they were a little cautious, they could avoid most of the dangers. But it was different here. There was life everywhere, full of vitality and full of killing intent. It was impossible to guard against. If they had to deal with every kind, they would die of exhaustion. This was the world of fierce beasts. Screech, a few eagle cries came from the sky. The faces of several people from the Hui tribe suddenly changed. They could feel the anxiety from the eagle's cries and wanted to climb up the tree to see what was going on. The foliage here was lush, almost covering the sky above. Only some fine yang guang shone through the narrow gaps between the leaves. No need to look. Your eagles must have gone the wrong way and entered the territory of other fierce beasts. Xiao Xian guessed without looking. Tell them not to fly around and follow the original route. Be honest and don't fight with those fierce beasts. It won't be good if they attract more birds. Xiao Xian explained. Gula quickly nodded and climbed up the tree. He whistled to the sky and waited for the giant mountain eagles to fly down. He gave them a few words of advice before returning to the group. In the mountains, there are many places you have to pay attention to. Some areas are surrounded by fierce beasts. Don't wander around. You have to see if you can deal with those beasts. If you enter the territory of a fierce beast that you can't beat and kill its prey, then you're out of luck. Xiao Xian led the way while explaining to these people who had never lived in this mountain. If they could learn more about it, they could avoid trouble. But, how do we know where the fierce beasts are and where we can't mess with them? Someone in the group asked. Don't you have us? Xiao Xian said, we haven't really entered the heart of the ferocious beast mountain forest yet. We Yinjiao know more about this place. As long as you follow our instructions, you can avoid some unnecessary trouble. So, they had to go wherever the Yinjiao told them to go. The people who heard Xiao Xian's words were unhappy, but they could only follow the instructions of the Yinjiao people in the ferocious beast mountain forest. After all, they had no experience surviving in the ferocious beast mountain forest. I just hope you can lead the way. Huang Yi of the Mang tribe said. That's for sure. Don't worry. As soon as Xiao Xian's voice fell, they heard cracking sounds not far away. It was the sound of branches and vines breaking, and it was getting closer and closer. A huge beast's head suddenly rose from the ground, emerging from under the crisscrossing vines and branches. The lines on the surface of its body were like cracks on the bark of an ancient tree. Its two huge nostrils were big enough for people to crawl in directly. The low growls of the beast sounded like muffled thunder. Such a huge vicious beast was so close to them, yet it was hidden so well. They didn't feel its breath at all just now. The people in the group glared at Xiao Xian. This guy just told them not to worry. What was this? Not to worry, my ass. They almost peed their pants, okay? As if he knew what the people in the group were going to say, Xiao Xian lifted his chin and pointed at the fierce beast. Don't just look. Do it. It's tonight's dinner. The others, without waiting for the others' reactions, the 5 Yinjiao people had already picked up their weapons and rushed over. Roar, the giant beast let out a roar of provocation. On the other side, Xiao Xian's group of 5 exploded with their peak totemic power at almost the same time. Their vast auras directly pressed against the fierce beast not far away. Neither man nor beast backed down. The tyrannical auras collided in this cramped place. On the tangled vines, leaves flew out of the vines as if they were suddenly torn off by someone. The dense foliage of the shrubs swayed violently, making rustling sounds like a rainstorm. Under the impact of the 2 auras, those who were close to them could feel the creaking of their bones. It was as if they were a lonely boat under the waves. Once they were in a hunting mode, the Yinjiao people couldn't be distracted. This was what they were best at and loved. When facing people, they had to consider too many things. Many times, it wasn't as if you were stronger than your opponent that you would have a good ending. The human heart was complicated and difficult to understand. This was something the Yinjiao people only understood after coming into contact with other tribes. It was because of this understanding that many Yinjiao people preferred to hunt in the mountains and forests. In times of crisis, it made people's blood boil, and it was a carefree exercise. Perhaps some of the smarter and more cunning beasts would occasionally do something surprising, but that was rare. Most of the time, the beasts relied on their own advantages to start a battle for survival. As a hunter, as long as they were stronger than you, that was enough. It was a simple law of the jungle. The roars of the beasts, the sounds of sharp and blunt weapons hitting each other, and the whirling waves of air, all of the animals hiding in the surroundings were frightened and fled in all directions. The people from the other tribes stood to the side, watching the 5 Yinjiao people use the most direct and barbaric method to hunt. The Yinjiao people were really fierce. Chapter 536. Xiao Xian and the others chose to use the most direct hunting method to intimidate this group of people. Didn't this group of people think that the Yinjiao people were barbaric and violent? Then let them see how barbaric and violent they were, and let them know that once they entered the forest, they shouldn't think too much and be obedient. On the 5th day of entering the forest, a group of more than 60 people walked in the forest. The initial discomfort had passed, and now, these tribes from the Central Plains or the grasslands had begun to understand some of the most basic survival skills in this forest. Above the crisscrossing net of vines, a huge face that was close to 2 meters tall suddenly appeared. 2 pitch-black eyes seemed to be looking in the direction of the team. The whole face was distorted in a somewhat strange way, and it was dyed with a terrifying coldness by the different colors. At first, when they saw this face, many people in the group were frightened and almost attacked. Fortunately, Xiao Xian and the others stopped them in time. Otherwise, everyone would have suffered. But now, seeing this face again, other people in the group felt a little uncomfortable, but they were able to deal with it calmly. The Yinjiao people were right. Sometimes, things that seemed scary on the surface were actually not. Moreover, most of the time, they were listed as objects to be ignored. After the group had all passed through here, the face that suddenly appeared on the net of interwoven vines gradually changed color, like a canvas washed with detergent. Moreover, it folded up, and both sides began to fold at the same time. After a short while, a strangely striped butterfly flew out of the net of vines and flew towards a darker place where the vines were denser and where Yang Guang could barely be seen. This was actually a kind of butterfly in the fearsome beast mountain forest. They usually liked to rest on the net of interwoven vines, but when they rested, they usually raised their wings. Only when they sensed unfamiliar people or danger would they suddenly open their wings and flatten them, using the patterns on their wings to scare away people or beasts. If someone attacked it, it would shake its wings, shaking off the powder on its wings that could make people sneeze. Even some of the larger fearsome beasts would sneeze for nearly an hour if they inhaled this powder. After walking for a while, they found a place to rest. Along the way, they had already experienced too much. Originally, they were dissatisfied because the Flaming Horn tribe asked for too much sincerity, but now, their dissatisfaction disappeared completely. At the same time, they were also glad that they chose to give sincerity, instead of entering the mountain themselves like the Tianshan tribe. He didn't know how the Tianshan tribe was doing now, but he didn't think it would be any better. There were some small flying insects around them. The Yinjiao people said that they didn't need to pay attention to these small flying insects, so everyone let down their guard and paid more attention to their surroundings. Over the past few days, their clothes, regardless of whether they were made of linen or silk, were stained with sweat, blood of beasts, and mud that masked the smell of grass and other things that were stuck to their bodies. Because there was no time to wash, the temperature in the forest was still high, and everyone was emitting a stench. But even so, they had no choice, because all kinds of beasts in the forest were very sensitive to strange smells and blood. Although they all had a strange smell on them, at least they could hide and not be discovered when they encountered fearsome beasts that they didn't want to face. There were many flying insects the size of sesame seeds around them. They probably smelled the smell on them and didn't disperse for a long time. Instead, more and more of them gathered. Is this where you usually hunt? Chu Su raised his hand and waved away the flying insects. Yeah. Xiao Xian replied simply as he chewed on the leftover meat that he had roasted yesterday. The Hui tribe was fine, but for the Mang, 8 limbs, and other tribes that focused on farming, it was hard for them to understand why the Yinjiao people often ran into the dangerous forest to hunt. Moreover, they ran so far. They had been walking for several days, but they still hadn't left the Yinjiao hunting range. After the Yinjiao tribe came to the old haunt, they opened up 2 hunting routes, and this was one of them. After eating the meat, Xiao Xian stood up and looked into the distance. The terrain here wasn't high, but fortunately, there weren't too many trees, so they could see further. There was a stream not far away, and they had just gotten water from there. For the Yinjiao people, drinking directly was no problem. They were used to it anyway, and their bodies could withstand it. But for the other tribes, drinking the water here could cause diarrhea. Xiao Xian told them to boil the water before drinking. Xiao Xian was about to discuss the next step with Duo Kong and Mai when his ears twitched. His eyes flashed, and his right foot moved back half a step, and his right arm suddenly stretched out. Whoosh! Chu Su and the others, who were not far away, only saw the shadow of a hand flash by. When they looked again, Xiao Xian was already holding something in his hand. This is... A few people nearby also came over to take a look. It was their first time coming to a place like this, and they still had a lot to learn from the Yinjiao people. Although they didn't like the Yinjiao people's way of doing things, they had to admit that they were far behind the Yinjiao people when it came to survival experience in the fearsome beast forest. So, if they didn't understand, they had to be thick-skinned and ask. Only when they understood could they avoid unnecessary danger and trouble. Mosquitoes, the kind that suck blood. Xiao Xian frowned. He clenched his fist, and carefully moved his index finger and thumb away. The thing in Xiao Xian's hand was still struggling. A thin needle, that was longer than Xiao Xian's pinky finger, stretched out and wriggled. Xiao Xian accurately pressed his thumb on the thin needle, and exerted force with his fingers. There was only a slight bang sound, as if something hard had been broken. Although the sound wasn't loud, and there were even various bird calls from the forest in the distance, it wasn't hard for the people present not to hear it. Seeing this scene, Chu Su and the others' facial muscles twitched violently. What was that bang sound just now? Was that a mosquito's mouth? Why did it sound like a hard needle? Did this thing suck blood too? Are you kidding me? What would it feel like to be stung by it? Xiao Xian opened his clenched fist and handed the dead mosquito to Chu Su and the others to study. Just now, he had broken the thin needle that was wriggling like a syringe, which was the mosquito's sucking mouthpart. With its mouthpart broken and being pinched half to death by Xiao Xian, the mosquito had long lost its ability to move and would not live for long. Xiao Xian handed the intact mosquito corpse to Chu Su and the others so that they could take a good look at this unnoticeable but extremely dangerous creature in the forest. It would also make it easier for him to take action. Chu Su picked up the mosquito corpse and looked at it. Although there were also very powerful mosquitoes where they lived and could suck people dry, compared to this one in front of them, the danger level was not as high. Ignoring the people studying the mosquito, Xiao Xian said to Mai and the others, "Something's wrong." Although the group of people were studying the mosquitoes in the forest, they also pricked up their ears and paid attention to Xiao Xian's words. After hearing Xiao Xian's words, they hurriedly asked, "What's wrong?" They shouldn't have appeared at this time. Xiao Xian wiped the sweat from his forehead. Does this weather look like winter? No one refuted that it was summer. It was so strange, even more serious than last year. Everyone felt uneasy, especially when they were told by the tribe's shaman that there might be unpredictable changes. They were especially worried. In this weather, mosquitoes like this will definitely appear in swarms. Xiao Xian said. Swarms? Looking at the dead mosquito and thinking about the mosquito swarms that might appear, the group of people could not help but shiver. Swarms of mosquitoes will appear during the day? Someone asked. What do you think? Xiao Xian looked at the mosquito and then glanced at the forest that was blocked by Yangguang. Then what should we do? Someone was anxious. Of course there is a way. You need to apply something, but it might be a little uncomfortable. Just bear with it. You can avoid those mosquitoes after applying it. Listen to me. Xiao Xian said and signaled to Tuo. Tuo nodded and then left with Mai. When they reappeared, they had already wrapped some black mud with big leaves, with a strange stench. Looking at the black mud handed over by the Yanjiao people, the faces of the people of several tribes darkened. Where did they dig this out of? What the hell is this? Where did you dig it out from? Do we really have to apply it? Huang Ye's voice was hoarse. Are you kidding us? It's up to you. We're just showing you the way. Xiao Xian said indifferently. Then why don't you apply it? Someone argued. Xiao Xian and the other 4 people rolled up their sleeves, revealing the lines drawn with paint from their shoulders to their fingers on their arms. We applied it before we came out. We applied it with a mixture of herbs and paint. This is our Yanjiao habit. But we didn't expect that there would be swarms of mosquitoes at this time. We didn't bring much medicine, so you have to make do with this mud. Huang Yi and the others' faces darkened even more. However, for the sake of safety, he endured it and used broken branches to smear the black mud on his body. The smell was so strong that it almost made him tear up. However, at dusk, they knew that Xiao Xian really didn't lie to them, and their resentment subsided a little. In the forest ahead, buzzing sounds echoed. Even if they didn't go there, they knew the possible situation over there. They couldn't tell how many mosquitoes there were just by the sound. Let's keep going. There's still some distance to the place where we'll rest tonight. The Yanjiao leading the way didn't stop, so the people behind had to keep up. The buzzing sounds in their ears were getting louder and louder. They could clearly hear the flapping of the mosquitoes' wings as they flew by, stimulating everyone's eardrums. Everyone's tense nerves jumped. Although the light was dim, with their eyesight, they could still see the needle-like mouths on the mosquitoes. There were too many of them. The mosquito swarms in front of them were almost all over the forest. From the ground to the branches above, they were all flying mosquitoes. They all blocked their sight. However, every time a mosquito flew by, it would avoid the people walking over and wouldn't jump up to bite them. Everyone's hanging hearts gradually relaxed. The breath they had been holding in was also slowly released. I told you, we're right to listen to us. Xiao Xian, who was leading the way in front, said. Chapter 537. The team rested in the cave they had planned for the night. They had found this cave when they were hunting, but it was too small to store bigger prey. After comparing a few places, Yanjiao's hunting team chose another place as their resting point, and this one was used as a backup. Xiao Xian and the others would not take these people to the resting place of their own hunting team. They could only come here, or they could sleep in the open. Only idiots would lead these people to their own secret base. Xiao Xian did not trust these people. They set up the firewood and boiled some water in a stone pot they made temporarily. Then they boiled a pot of soup and roasted some meat. In the forest outside the cave, there were some squeaking noises echoing in the air. He didn't know what it was, but it sounded creepy. The mud on their bodies had already coagulated, but they did not dare to take it off because they did not know if they would encounter more mosquito swarms later. Fortunately, the smell of the black mud had faded a little after it had coagulated. Even if it had not faded, they felt that it was bearable now. As the saying goes, one does not know how bad it is after smelling it for a long time. At first, some people were worried that Xiao Xian was playing a prank on them by giving them some mud with feces. Later they found out that the black mud came from some pits near the stream, because there was a kind of animal that liked to eat mosquitoes living in those pits. Therefore, mosquitoes were disgusted by the smell of the black mud, and would automatically avoid it when they smelled it. After knowing the truth, they felt a lot calmer. But what they did not know was that many animals that went to drink water in the pits where the black mud was produced would also be dragged into those pits. Although the Yinjiao people looked serious, they were actually laughing in their hearts. "What is that?" Chu Su said, pointing at the foot of the mountain. Xiao Xian looked down the mountain. In the dark, there were some shining curves in the forest, winding to the distance. There was a small river there, and those shining things were actually some small creatures living by the river. At night, they would float from the bottom of the river and gather near the river bank. The light they emitted would attract some animals that were attracted to the light. When those animals touched the water, they would find that they were glued to the water and unable to break free. In the end, they would be dragged into the water and eaten. "Don't go there. They will eat you," Xiao Xian said. Not every place that glowed was a channel that produced gems. Some places were absolutely dangerous, especially in a mountain forest like this. On the 15th day in the forest, the team had already left Yanjiao's hunting area and entered the heart of the fearsome beast forest. They had to be more careful as they went forward, because the 5 Yinjiao people did not have much to guide them. No one knew what would be in front of them. The team slowed down. Xiao Xian, Duo Kong, Mai, and the other 4 gathered together. It looked like they were discussing something, but in reality, the other 4 were covering for Xiao Xian. They had seen too many Yanjiao people like this over the past few days, so they were already used to it. Therefore, the people from the other 6 tribes did not pay much attention to it and gathered together to discuss. In a place where no one could see, Xiao Xian was quickly tying a knot on a straw rope in his hand. When Xiao Xian opened his eyes and looked at the rope that was finally tied, he read the hints given by the knots. Xiao Xian pointed in a direction. "Over there." The Yinjiao people had just finished discussing the direction when they heard a slightly arrogant voice say, "This old man has observed the weather and predicted that there will be rain tomorrow. At the latest, it will be the day after tomorrow, and it will not be light. It may even last for 2 to 3 days. How do you plan to deal with it?" Xiao Xian looked at the person who spoke. It was an elder of the Longboat tribe named Mu Yu. Along the way, he had heard him talk about observing the weather several times. The day before yesterday, he had even said that there would be no rain in 3 days. In fact, ever since they entered the forest, it had not really rained. Even if it did, it was just a small dot. Most of the time, it was sunny, and the temperature was getting higher. Looking at the other tribesmen, they seemed to believe Mu Yu's words. The 4 Yanjiao people glanced at the old man who was sitting there pretending to be deep in thought, then looked at Xiao Xian. They did not believe anyone but Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian shook his head. The arrogance on Mu Yu's face became even more obvious. He felt that when it came to observing the weather, no one here could compare to him. Perhaps the Yinjiao shamans had similar abilities, but that was different. The shamans used shaman power, while he relied on his rich personal experience. Moreover, there was no shaman here. The Longboat tribe spent most of the year on boats, traveling along the river, so they were more knowledgeable. Observing the weather was a skill that many crew members had to learn. They could judge the weather early, and they could also prepare in advance to reduce losses. Finally, they had a chance to show off their strengths. The Longboat tribe also felt a sense of relief. No matter how good the Yinjiao people's survival skills were in the fearsome beast forest, they could not judge the weather a few days in advance, right? These days, they had not heard them talk about it. At most, they could predict the next day's weather from the evening or night sky. They also thought that Xiao Xian's action of shaking his head meant that he did not know the weather. The other tribes were discussing finding a place to take shelter from the rain in advance. They were prepared to hide for 2 or 3 days. They did not want to walk in the rain in this forest. The 4 Yinjiao people knew that when Xiao Xian shook his head, he was actually saying, don't listen to his nonsense. There was no rain. Continue in the direction of the divination. Therefore, from the moment they entered the forest until now, this was the first time they had such a big disagreement. Yinjiao wanted to continue in the direction they had decided, while the other 6 tribes were more inclined to the Longboat tribe's decision. They wanted to find a place to take shelter from the rain first. Well, Xiao Xian was not angry. He said in a calm tone, "This place is beyond the range we are familiar with. We have done our duty of leading the way. If you have other decisions, we will not object. But we will still follow our own plan." "Wait, we will go with you," Gula hurriedly said. Since the Hui tribe had cooperated with Yinjiao and chosen the Yinjiao side, they should not betray them at this time. Moreover, Gula also felt that it was better to follow the Yinjiao. At worst, they would get wet in the rain. But the eagles in the sky would suffer. They did not like to get wet in the rain. The people of the Mang tribe looked at each other. Chu Su said, "Then let's go together. The Mang tribe is not familiar with the forest. We hope that the Yinjiao brothers can help us." Huang Yi, the leader of the Mang tribe, did not say anything, which meant that he agreed with Chu Su's decision. Although he felt that Mu Yu was right, at the same time, after 10 days of observation, he felt that the Yinjiao people's beast-like intuition was very rare and worth studying. Just as Chu Su said, in this forest, it was better to observe how the Yinjiao people acted. The people of the 8 Limbs tribe looked at each other. But since the people of the Mang tribe were on their side, they could not stay on the Longboat tribe's side. It was better to cooperate with the Mang tribe. The people of the 1,000 Masks tribe did not say anything. They took big steps towards the Yinjiao side, which made Mu Yu's eyebrows twitch. Seeing this situation, the Feather tribe's determination to stand on the Longboat side was shaken. "No, it's over. There are only a few of us here. We will definitely be at a disadvantage." So Guji, the leader of the Feather tribe, sighed. He smiled apologetically to Mu Yu and led his people to stand on the Yinjiao side. The people of the Longboat tribe. How could they choose in this situation? Anyway, they would definitely not choose to be alone. So Mu Yu, with a pale face, continued to follow the Yinjiao side with the others. "Why did you choose this direction?" Huang Yi asked Xiao Xian. "Because I think we can find the slaves of Rock Hill City here," Xiao Xian said. Behind him, Mu Yu snorted. His voice was neither soft nor loud, but it could be heard. Xiao Xian's face did not change at all, as if he did not hear the sarcastic snort. He led his people and continued to walk. The next day, blue sky, white clouds, and scorching sun. It did not look like it was going to rain. Mu Yu's face became uncomfortable. On the 3rd day, the sun was shining in the sky. The scorching sun was still scorching the earth. Mu Yu was quite uncomfortable. He kept his eyelids down and did not look at anyone. The people of the Longboat tribe did not say anything. They pretended to be dumb. On the 4th day, it still did not look like it was going to rain. However, no one was in the mood to make fun of Mu Yu. After entering the heart of the fearsome Beast Mountain Forest, the sense of crisis was even stronger. They did not want to be distracted. What Xiao Xian did not explain was that the weather in the fearsome Beast Mountain Forest changed too quickly. The closer they got to the heart of the forest, the more unpredictable it was. If Yang Sui of the Rain tribe was here, he might be able to make some predictions in advance. The people of the Longboat tribe? Forget it. Their experience was accumulated under normal circumstances. It might not be applicable here. Moreover, Xiao Xian felt that the weather was getting hotter and hotter. It was already out of the ordinary and unpredictable. Even if Xiao Xian learned to observe the sky from others, he could not accurately predict the weather unless he used not divination. Xiao Xian would not say these explanations. He would not give Mu Yu a way out. Who asked him to be so arrogant before? In the forest, the insects hiding among the leaves were noisy. Xian, Mai, who came down from the tree, pointed in a direction with a serious look. Xiao Xian jumped up the tree and looked in the direction Mai pointed. Not far ahead, there were some gray figures flying among the verdant green. What's wrong? Gula asked. Let's go ahead and take a look. Those gray figures were a type of scavenger bird. When Xiao Xian arrived, the ground was almost covered in a layer of gray. Sensing people coming over, the gray figures shouted and flew into the sky in flocks. The layer of gray that originally covered the ground was also removed. There were the bones of a fearsome beast on the ground, as well as a few human bones. Whether it was the humans or the fearsome beast, their original appearance could no longer be seen. Less than 1/5 of their bodies were eaten. There was a broken spear stuck in one of the bones. The spearhead was made of metal and not stone. It's those slaves. Seeing this, the people of several tribes were delighted. The flaming horns were right. As they walked in this direction, they actually found the group of slaves sent by Rock Hill City. Chapter 538. There were many broken branches around them. The branches and leaves that blocked the sky above were scattered on the ground, revealing an empty space where Yang Guang could shine directly on the ground. Under the hot weather and scorching sun, the smell of rotting meat spread everywhere, attracting many scavengers. However, they didn't know if it was because a huge beast had been angered here not long ago. Other than the group of gray-feathered scavenger birds and some small flying insects, they didn't see any larger animals. After looking around and finding the tracks they were looking for, the team set off again. Since they had already found the tracks of the slaves sent by Rock Hill City, it was much easier to follow the tracks. After all, there were many slaves. It was said that Rock Hill City sent 500 people this time. Compared to the entire tribe or Rock Hill City, it wasn't a lot. However, to send 500 people all the way from the desert and into the fearsome beast forest was a big deal. Now, Xiao Xian's team only had 50 to 60 people. After finding the tracks of the slaves, the others no longer doubted the words of the Yanjiao people. In their hearts, they were glad that they chose to follow Yanjiao. Otherwise, if they had to look for a team of 500 people in such a large forest, they might not be able to find it even after 100 days. Many of the tracks couldn't be maintained for too long. The self-healing speed of the forest here was much faster than people thought. Even the corpses they saw were almost eaten up. Tomorrow, there wouldn't even be a bone left. Because the team entered the forest much later than the slaves, the tracks left by the slaves were mostly covered by the self-healing of the forest, so they didn't know where the slaves went in the beginning. Thinking about it this way, the tribes felt that the sincerity they paid to Yanjiao was quite worth it. It was much harder to find a satisfactory place to rest if they were out of Yanjiao's familiar range. There were more hidden dangers in the forest, and they were more hidden. It was impossible to guard against them. Following the trail left behind by the slave caravan for 4 days, 5 out of the 63 people in the caravan were now missing. They had lost their lives due to various reasons along the way. This morning, a member of the Longbow tribe was poisoned to death by a poisonous snake. They didn't even have time to rescue him. That person was bitten on the neck. Before anyone could check on his injuries, his entire neck turned black rapidly, as if it had been dyed with ink. It even started to fester. The person who was bitten died not long after. That was an intermediate totem warrior. His body was resistant to poison, but he didn't last long. In the end, he couldn't even say a word. The venomous snake that had bitten people was lying in ambush on the tree. It was silent, like a dead thing that had clung to the tree. It seemed to have merged with the tree and would only attack when people passed by. In the past, the people of the Longbow tribe thought that large snakes were generally not poisonous, unless they were ferocious beasts. But here, there were many kinds of large poisonous snakes, and they were all highly venomous. Just like the one that had bitten their companions, it was thicker than a person and extremely poisonous. After its head was cut off, it almost bit another person. If the Yanjiao people hadn't acted fast enough, the Longbow tribe would have lost 2 people. Don't think that these things are harmless just because their heads are cut off. Be careful, or it'll be too late to cry. Xiao Xian said to those people. Because he had been to forests like this before. Before the Yinjiao tribes migrated to the old haunt, many of the hunting teams had passed through forests like this. Especially the advance group, it was no less difficult than here. Therefore, even though it was the first time Mai and Tua came here, they were able to adapt quickly. It was their first time here, so they weren't familiar with the terrain. They couldn't find a cave for them to rest in, so they had to sleep in the open most of the time. 2 days ago, when they were looking for a place to rest, they spent the night in the open air on a mountain. They didn't find a cave, so they rested in a leeward place near the mountainside. The slave teams that had passed by here before should have also rested here, leaving behind traces of activity. There were some carvings on the mountain wall. With Xiao Xian's understanding of stone, many of the carvings on the mountain wall weren't made in a short period of time. Some of them should have been made a long time ago. This also proved that there were slave teams that had been sent here before. Finding traces of slave activity also confirmed Xiao Xian's guess. The people from Rock Hill City had definitely caught the green-faced fanged beast. Along the way, they saw some slave corpses from time to time. Some were already gnawed beyond recognition, and some were mutilated. In a place like this, humans were the prey. At noon, 2 people from the 8 Limbs tribe went to the river to get water. However, they didn't go too close to the river. The day before yesterday, one of their people was dragged into the river because he was too close. He didn't even see what was dragging him. The weather was getting hotter, and it was very tiring for them to travel. They were sweating all over. Walking in the forest, although the branches and leaves above blocked most of the yangguang, everyone could feel the higher the temperature, and the stronger the need for water. A thin wire was tied to a hard shell that looked similar to a coconut. The round shell had a hole half the size of a fist dug out. A stone was tied to the shell, and then the shell and the stone were thrown into the river 20 meters away. With a thud, the round shell was pulled down by the stones tied to it. The river water poured into the round shell from the hole dug out. When they felt that it was enough, the 2 warriors of 8 Limbs suddenly pulled the strings in their hands, trying to pull back the round shell that had been filled with water. As soon as the water-filled shell emerged from the water and was pulled into the air, a 2-meter-long figure suddenly jumped out of the river and bit the shell that was pulled into the air. Then, the shell fell back into the water, causing the water to splash everywhere. The 2 warriors who were fetching water could still clearly hear the cracking sound of the round shell that was filled with water breaking. However, they had seen similar situations several times. After a slight surprise, they calmly took out the same round shell again, and threw it into the river. This time they were not bitten, and the water was successfully fetched. Next time, we can change it to a more solid silk. We can still fish. Xiao Xian looked at the still turbulent river and said. The figure that jumped up just now looked like a lizard without legs. It should be a kind of fish in the river. The warrior from the 8 Limbs tribe thought for a while, and agreed. If it was a solid wire, if it was bitten while fetching water, it could drag out the things in the water. Maybe it could solve the problem of food at night. He couldn't drag it out by himself, so he asked the Yinjiao people for help. The Yinjiao people were strong. The 8 Limbs tribe was rich in spider silk. Different species of spiders produced different kinds of spider silk. After processing, some silk was soft enough to weave clothes, and some was stronger, but harder, suitable for weaving nets, setting traps, and catching prey. For the young people in the team, this was a rare experience, far better than the one in the desert. They not only had to follow the traces of the slaves, but also had to solve the problems of food and water. Sometimes they even had to fight with the bear for a cave. In the ferocious beast mountain forest at night, the cave was much safer. When they were looking for a place to rest for the night, they encountered a situation of fighting for a cave, but they didn't win that time. The giant bear was too smart, and it didn't come out at all. No matter how they provoked it, it just stayed in the cave and guarded that place. If the giant bear was lured out of the cave, they could cooperate to deal with it, or even turn it into their dinner. But if the bear didn't come out, it was difficult. The people outside couldn't rush in, and the bear in the cave made full use of the terrain to defend. The people in the team took turns to attack it, but they still couldn't lure it out. Chu Su and the others were roared at by the giant bear. The giant bear must have eaten fish, because its saliva still had a strong fishy smell. Now Chu Su was walking with the fishy smell all over his body. However, they didn't know if it was the effect of the giant bear's saliva, but there were several times when the people in the team were ambushed by beasts, but none of them attacked Chu Su. This was another kind of luck for him. Another half a day passed, and when the team went over a mountain, they stopped halfway up and planned to rest. What's wrong? Seeing Xiao Xian standing on a rock and looking into the distance, Duo Kong and the others came over and asked. Xiao Xian pointed to the front. Did you notice anything different? Different? Duo Kong and the others looked in that direction. There are many mountains. Not only that, the leaves in that place are very different. Xiao Xian pointed out. Now that you mention it, I think so too. The leaves there look soft and tender. Duo Kong touched his chin and reached out to pluck a leaf from a shrub next to him to take a look. Perhaps it was because the weather was too hot and there was no rain for a long time, but many of the plants here looked a little withered. The leaves on the branches a little further away from the trunk looked very listless. However, when he looked in that direction again, although he couldn't see what kind of plants were growing on the mountain due to the distance, the emerald greenery there was indeed very eye-catching. Even the slanted sunlight couldn't dim them, especially in such a hot climate. The greenery there was so tender and fresh that water could be squeezed out with a little pinch. It was very refreshing. Hey, look, there's smoke over there. Mai said. Mai's voice also attracted the others in the team to gather and look in front. Among the towering mountains, in the lush green field of vision, some gray smoke was rising from the mountain forest over there. However, because of the wind, it was blown away as soon as it came out. It's that group of slaves. It must be them. We've finally caught up. The people in the team were excited. Xiao Xian looked at the mountain over there and said, maybe what they're looking for is in the mountain forest in front of us. The team was silent, and more than 50 pairs of eyes looked at Xiao Xian. Elder Xiao Xian means that it's here? Huang Yi asked. Along the way, they had seen a lot. Their attitude towards the Yinjiao people had also changed significantly, especially Xiao Xian, who played a role in decision-making. When Huang Yi and the others spoke, they would use the word elder, which was also a kind of recognition. However, Xiao Xian didn't care about this. He didn't care whether others recognized him or not. At this moment, Xiao Xian looked at the mountain forest in front of him, thinking about the information about the green-faced fanged beast. There were many mountains in front of him, so there should be more water. At first glance, it gave people a sense of tranquility. In the fearsome beast mountain forest, it could be considered a special area. The green-faced fanged beast could really be there. Chapter 539. In the middle of the mountains, the sound of people shouting could be heard from the wooden houses that were built. These wooden houses were built recently. The broken parts of the wood were relatively new. The wooden houses were arranged here, and it looked like a mountain village that lived in seclusion in this uninhabited place. Thick wooden pillars more than 10 meters tall had been erected around the perimeter, forming a wall that blocked some of the smaller wild beasts outside. On top of the tall tower, there were 3 slaves with tan skin. They were standing there and looking in 3 different directions. In the open space, huge beast bones were thrown there. The bones were so white that there was not a trace of flesh left. They had been disassembled to the point that their original appearance could not be seen. Only the eye holes and nostrils above let people know that this was the head of a giant beast. The bones, horns, and teeth that were suitable for polishing weapons had been dismantled. The sound of polishing bones and horns could be heard everywhere. Although most of the weapons they brought out were metal weapons, they had consumed a lot. The conditions here were limited. They could only repair some of the metal weapons that were not seriously damaged. Those beyond the repair range could only be put aside. Without weapons, they could not survive in this place full of fierce beasts and dangers. Compared to stone tools, bones, horns, teeth, and so on were more convenient. The slaves in charge of polishing were running back and forth with a variety of tools. They seemed very busy. Compared to other people's movements, there was a small open space in the middle of the wooden houses. No one dared to run around here, let alone shout loudly. There was a bonfire in the middle of the clearing. Pieces of beast bones with meat were being roasted there. Fat dripped into the bonfire, making sizzling sounds. A middle-aged man who was relatively fair sat beside the bonfire. The other slaves were either wearing tattered sackcloth or wrapped in blood-stained animal skins, but this middle-aged man was wearing very clean clothes. It was also linen, but the cloth on his body was woven more carefully. The texture was obviously different from the others. There were some scratches at the corners of his clothes, but there were no holes at all. At this time, the middle-aged man was frowning, looking at a drawn animal skin roll in his hand. There were some simple drawings on the animal skin scroll. The dark green triangular shapes were mountains, and the shapeless large green areas were forests in other places. Among these green areas, there was a sandy yellow line passing through them and finally ending at one place. It was a simple map. The line on the map was the route their team had taken. One end of the line was where they had entered the forest, and the other end was where they were now. After making sure that he had not gone the wrong way, the middle-aged man's brows furrowed even deeper. Several senior slaves standing next to him bowed their heads and only used their peripheral vision to carefully pay attention to the person sitting on the stone and looking at the map. They knew that the other party was in a bad mood, so they didn't dare to say anything, for fear that they would say something wrong and cause the anger of this person. "It's here. There's no mistake," the middle-aged man sitting on the rock murmured. Because of the fluctuation of his emotions, his feet stomped on the ground, creating a foot-sized hole in the weeds under his feet. The slave standing next to him lowered his head even more. The smell of meat permeated the mountain stronghold. The slaves who were guarding or busy in various places sniffed fiercely. The smell of meat made them obsessed and stimulated the secretion of saliva. However, even if they wanted to look over there, they still resisted the urge to turn their heads and stared at the work in progress in their hands. They didn't dare to look around. At this time, there was movement at the entrance of the mountain stronghold. A team of 20 people came back from the outside, either carrying or dragging small prey. The middle-aged man who was staring at the map suddenly looked up. The team who had just entered the temporary mountain stronghold saw the other party, and their eyes were averted. They didn't dare to look at the other party directly. The middle-aged man holding the animal skin roll had a flash of expectation in his eyes. Soon, it dimmed and was followed by a rapid rise in anger. "Still can't find it? How can it be? Why can't I find it?" The middle-aged man, whose eyes were red with anger, shook his arm and wanted to smash the animal skin roll in his hand to the ground. But the moment before it fell, he paused and kicked it vigorously. The animal skin roll couldn't be thrown away. It was an important guide for their operation. But he couldn't vent his anger. He was unhappy and could only kick the grass on the ground. The grass that was higher than his knees was kicked to pieces. "If you can't find the green-faced fanged beast, why are you venting your anger on grass?" A lazy voice was heard. The middle-aged man holding the animal skin roll heard this voice and the corner of his eye twitched. He didn't look in that direction. He turned his head and shouted at the slaves who were standing next to him, "Keep looking for it. If you can't find it, you don't have to go back." When they heard that they couldn't go back, the group of slaves wailed in their hearts. They didn't dare to delay. Those who came back before this hurriedly ate something and set off again. The slaves who were polishing the horns and bones moved even faster. For many people, the desert was a land of death. It was dry and windy, and it was rare to see a bit of green. It was so desolate that people would avoid hearing about it. But for these slaves, even if the food in the desert couldn't be compared to the forest full of trees and beasts, they were already used to it. Many of the people in the group had been slaves for generations. Servility was engraved in their bones. Other than being slaves, they didn't know what else to do. Moreover, in these people's eyes, Rock Hill City was their home. It was the place they were loyal to. It was also their belief. If they couldn't go back, it was the same as asking for their lives. Now that Rock Hill City was the overlord of the desert, the slaves of Rock Hill City shared the glory and became even more loyal to Rock Hill City. The people who were sent out were all loyal to Rock Hill City, so there was no need to worry about their betrayal. Of the 500 people who came out, more than 100 died or were injured because of various dangers in the forest. Fortunately, they found this place. Unfortunately, the place marked on the map was the destination. They searched for a few days and still couldn't find the target. The middle-aged man returned to the fire and sat on a rock to sulk. He was too embarrassed to go back if he couldn't find the green-faced fanged beast. But there was no other way. Was he supposed to turn the mountains upside down to look for it? After taking a few deep breaths, the middle-aged man couldn't help but ask, "Robber 4, how's your side?" Didn't find it. These 3 words were just like this person's attitude. He was completely indifferent. He was not in a hurry and was very comfortable as if he was playing. He seemed to be enjoying it. Then why aren't you looking for it? The middle-aged man squeezed the words out from between his teeth. He really didn't understand why Shu wanted to find the robbers. What else could they do other than steal? Eat? Robber 4 slowly walked to the fire and sat down. He picked up the nicely roasted ribs and started eating without caring about the heat. As he ate, he mumbled, "If it was so easy to find, you people from Rock Hill City wouldn't have only found 3 in a few hundred years." Oh, right, sure. Robber 4 suddenly remembered something and said, "There are tribesmen following us." To Robber 4, the robbers were different. They weren't slaves and they weren't traditional tribes. He was also very satisfied with the current state of the robbers. He felt that he was better than the average tribe. So, when he talked about tribes, he usually referred to other tribes and not robbers. Tribesmen? So fast? Sure didn't expect the tribesmen to find them so quickly. They wanted to steal the green-faced fanged beast? Feeling the murderous aura from Sure, Robber 4 still spoke slowly. "Actually, we don't have to care about them. Maybe they can help us find the green-faced fanged beast." Hearing this, Sure's eyes flashed. He didn't say anything, but he agreed with Robber 4. They had been here for a few days and hadn't made any progress. Maybe the tribesmen could find something? After finishing the meat, Robber 4 didn't stay any longer. He walked out of the village and into the dense forest outside. The slaves on guard acted as if they didn't see him. In the forest, the humid air dispelled the heat brought by the weather. Under the branches that covered the sky, there was a refreshing breeze. Robber 4 walked in the forest. Most of the weeds on the ground were taller than his waist. Walking in the forest was like walking in a sea of green. There weren't any slaves from Rock Hill City here. "How is it?" Robber 4 asked. 5 steps away from him, on the trunk of a big tree, the silhouette of a person slowly appeared. "I couldn't find anything." The person who came down from the tree said in a puzzled tone, "The slaves only know that they are here to look for something. They don't know anything else. But I can confirm that Sure is in a hurry. What is the use of the green-faced fanged beast? If Sure didn't say, we wouldn't know. But we don't have to move for now. Whether the slaves find the green-faced fanged beast or the tribesmen find it, it's a good thing for us." Understood. As he spoke, the person jumped up and ran forward, disappearing in the blink of an eye. A long, dark green polypede suddenly stood up from the thick grass. Its 2 pincers expanded to an exaggerated angle and pounced towards Robber 4 who was standing in the grass. But in the next moment, the person standing there disappeared. The polypede that stood up half of its body missed its target. The two antennae on its head spun like antennae, as if it was searching for something. When it couldn't find anything, it gave up on its prey and dived back into the thick grass. From afar, among the waves of green grass, some of the leaves were swaying. It was like a ripple on the surface of a lake. Then, the swaying of the leaves became smaller and smaller until it stopped. The forest returned to its previous tranquility. Chapter 540. It was a strange tree without any leaves or branches. It was like a bare wooden stake standing there, except that there were hundreds of fist-sized holes on it. Crack! The swinging axe brought with it a torrential wind, chopping down the strange-looking tree. This is the last one. Chu Su wiped the sweat off his forehead and chopped the tree into several sections with his axe. As he chopped down again and again, the fist-sized holes in the tree had flower bud-like things sticking out. The two closed leaves were wide open as if they wanted to bite something. This was the tree that bit off a piece of flesh from a Mang warrior today. It was poisonous and could prevent blood from clotting. If the wound was left untreated, the blood would continue to flow. After cutting the tree into small pieces, the large flower buds on the tree drooped down weakly as if they had lost their strength. Only then did Chu Su pick up the pieces of wood and throw them into the woven net, saving them for the fire. As long as the buds were plucked from the tree, they could burn easily and were suitable for firewood. They followed Xiao Xian and a few other Yanjiao people into the mountain range and found a place to rest on another mountain not far from the Rock Hill City people. A little higher up the mountain, there was an underground cave. They were all resting there. If the people from Rock Hill City had started a fire, they would have been able to see the smoke coming from the other side of the mountain. Chu Su dragged a net of chopped firewood back to the resting place. There was a flat boulder and under the boulder was a wide and short cave entrance. Chu Su had to bend his knees when he entered. It looked narrow from the outside but it was much more spacious inside. It could accommodate more than 50 people and there were some roasted meat and fresh fruits. The cave was not crowded at all. However, because it was an underground cave, the ventilation holes around it could not bring in more light. They could only rely on water moon stones when they were inside. It's so hot. Chu Su threw the net of firewood aside and lay on the ground to rest. The cold stone floor made Chu Su, who had been busy the whole morning, feel so comfortable that he let out a long sigh. When the temperature outside was getting higher, it was indeed much cooler inside the cave. In this kind of weather, it was easy to forget that it was actually winter. Everyone in the cave surrounded Xiao Xian and ignored Chu Su. Instead, they were staring at Xiao Xian's hands. Those who were younger and had a lower status in the group could not squeeze in at all. They could only scratch their ears and cheeks at the side, listening to the discussions of the few people inside. Their hearts itched, but they had no choice but to wait at the side. Not done yet? Chu Su asked the person who was pushed aside. It was a young warrior from the Eight Limbs tribe. Should be done soon. The man replied. When Chu Su went out of the cave to chop firewood, someone brought back a trap that was dismantled from the trap set by the slaves of Rock Hill City. Although it was taken down, the trap was still mostly intact. It was just that there were some complicated knots and structures. Many people wanted to take it down and study it carefully, but they had no idea where to start. In the end, Xiao Xian stood up and took over the task. It was obvious that the trap was set up in a dense area. There was a bait and a lasso, as well as some metal parts. It looked like a trap specially made for something. What were the people from Rock Hill City looking for? Green-faced fanged beasts. Xiao Xian had already told everyone that the people from Rock Hill City were looking for the green-faced fanged beasts. However, there were many strange animals in the forest. After searching for a while, they did not find any that looked like the green-faced fanged beast. They had been here for 2 days, but they did not meet the slaves from Rock Hill City, nor did they see the so-called green-faced fanged beast. If they did not see the people from Rock Hill City stationed here for a long time, the people from other tribes would not believe Xiao Xian's words. Xiao Xian told them about the green-faced fanged beasts, but only revealed that they got the information from the robbers. Yinjiao did catch the robbers. The other tribes knew this, so they still believed part of Xiao Xian's words. However, Xiao Xian did not say why the people from Rock Hill City were looking for the green-faced fanged beasts. The other 4 people from Yinjiao also kept their mouths shut. No matter what the truth was, if they wanted to understand the purpose of the slave masters from Rock Hill City, they had to know what the green-faced fanged beast was. The other tribes saw the desert slave masters as their most threatening opponent. Every move from Rock Hill City affected their nerves. So now, when Xiao Xian was dismantling the trap, the people from other tribes gathered around. In terms of traps and catching fearsome beasts, the people from Yinjiao were better. They were willing to wait for Xiao Xian's explanation. Xiao Xian looked at the dismantled trap and let out a long sigh. It's done. How is it? The people who were waiting couldn't wait to ask. Xiao Xian picked up a small clump of green grass from the trap. This should be the green-faced fanged beast's favorite food. That's why the people from Rock Hill City used it as bait. Looking at the size of the trap, the green-faced fanged beast shouldn't be too big. Xiao Xian stood up and gestured. The size range should be from this tall to this tall. According to Xiao Xian's speculation, the green-faced fanged beasts shouldn't be taller than their chest. Of course, it could be taller, but that was the answer given by the trap. There should be horns around here. Xiao Xian picked up a burned branch and drew on the ground of the cave. The drawing that Robber 7 gave them was too abstract. Even though it was exactly the same as the original drawing, they couldn't see the specific appearance of the green-faced fanged beast. Xiao Xian only drew it based on the information he knew. The people around Xiao Xian stretched their necks and stared at the drawing on the ground with their eyes wide open. It was as if they wanted to imprint it in their minds. Can we make an accurate guess with just one trap? Why don't we dismantle another trap? Huang Yi suggested. Again? It's not impossible, but it's easy to be noticed by the people from Rock Hill City. Someone hesitated. Do you really think they don't know? Xiao Xian threw away the branch in his hand and looked at the dismantled trap. Maybe they left this trap on purpose. On purpose? Why? Could it be that they changed the trap to fool us? Huang Yi asked. Probably not. I think the people from Rock Hill City want us to find it more. Why do you say that? Because they can't find it. Xiao Xian deliberately emphasized the words, can't find it. The green-faced fanged beast was indeed not easy to find. Otherwise, Yinjiao's hunting team wouldn't have been able to find it until now. The slaves in Rock Hill City should have been carefully selected, and there were bandits following them. Even if the slaves didn't notice, the bandits must have noticed the existence of this group of people. They noticed the group of people following them, but they still pretended not to see them. The two sides hadn't met yet, but instead, they left a trap to catch ferocious beasts. Xiao Xian wouldn't believe that they didn't have other intentions. So, the people from Rock Hill City didn't come over these 2 days because they knew we were here? Guji walked in circles and thought, this is also a good thing. Let's go find our own things. Okay, let's follow Elder Xiao Xian's drawing and start looking for this green-faced fanged beast. Huang Yi said and looked at Xiao Xian. Elder Xiao Xian, do you have anything else to say? Nothing else. I just want everyone to be mentally prepared. Xiao Xian said. What kind of preparation? The people in the cave looked at Xiao Xian. According to what Gula and the others saw in the sky, the people from Rock Hill City have already built houses and walls. It looks like they are prepared to stay here for a long time. Prepared to stay here for a long time? The cave was silent for a moment. Even the slaves in Rock Hill City could live in wooden houses. Were they really going to sleep in caves forever? Why don't we build houses? Huang Yi suggested. The people from the Feather Tribe had something to say at this time. It was a rare opportunity to show off. It's too eye-catching to build on the ground. Why don't we build houses in trees in the forest? It'll be harder to be discovered. Then you guys build houses. We'll go look around and see if we can find this kind of grass. Huang Yi distributed the grass that Xiao Xian handed over to everyone. Since they knew that green-faced fanged beasts like to eat this kind of grass, they should go find a place with a lot of it. He didn't believe that they couldn't find one. They split up and all the people in the cave went out at once, leaving only a few injured people behind. If they found anything unusual, they just had to blow the whistle. Xiao Xian's group of 5 moved together. Without the others, Duo Kong couldn't hold back his words. Xiao Xian, aren't you worried that those people will catch all the green-faced fanged beasts? Duo Kong didn't like to cooperate with those people. He didn't trust them. We'll see if we can find them. There were only 5 people from Yanjiao. Since the others were also targeting the green-faced fanged beasts, there was no need to hide anymore. The most important thing now was to confirm if the green-faced fanged beasts were really here. If they were really here, Yanjiao would have plenty of opportunities in the future. After all, they lived in the fearsome beast forest. Duo Kong thought about it and didn't say anything more. The grass they got from the trap didn't look special at first glance, but if you looked closely, you would find that it was different from many other similar grasses in the forest. The biggest difference was that when you sniffed it up close, you could smell a faint fragrance. This fragrance separated it from other grasses. The problem was that there were so many similar grasses in the forest. You couldn't just go and sniff every one you saw, right? What if you were poisoned? As people who often hunted in the forest, the 5 people from Yanjiao had good eyesight. They were better than the others. However, they only found 5 stalks in the cave at night. On the whole mountain, they only found 5 stalks. The growth rate was terrifyingly low. The possibility of green-faced fanged beasts appearing here was also much lower. Don't worry, we'll continue tomorrow, Xiao Xian comforted them. Outside, the feather tribesmen were very efficient. They had already built small houses on the trees. Each house was about 10 square meters. They were covered with vines and branches, so it wasn't easy to find them. However, compared to those, the 5 people from Yanjiao still preferred to stay in the cave. That night, half of them stayed in the cave while the other half stayed outside. Compared to other sleepless nights, Xiao Xian had a good night's sleep. He even had a dream. Chapter 541. Under normal circumstances, Xiao Xian rarely dreamed. Every time he dreamed, there must be a reason, and it must be something important that might actually happen. Counting all the dreams he had so far, which one of them didn't have a strong hint? Xiao Xian sometimes wanted to have that kind of dream a few more times. Unfortunately, it wasn't something he could control. It could only be encountered and not forced. But on this night, after Xiao Xian fell asleep, he entered a dream that he hadn't had in a long time. Xiao Xian felt like he was in the middle of a mountain forest. He could hear the leaves and grass around him rustling due to the gusts of wind, like waves rising and falling. Looking up, the 2 moons in the sky were getting smaller and smaller. After all, it was the end of the year. The 2 moons had separated into thin, curved buds, unable to bring enough light to the earth. There was no starlight, and the surroundings were very dark. Xiao Xian wanted to use his special vision to observe this place, but it was useless. After using it, it was as if he was shrouded in a thick layer of fog. It was worse than normal vision. Aside from the limitation of his vision, Xiao Xian felt that his mind was actually very clear. His senses were sharp, and he could clearly hear the subtle movements around him. This feeling was very strange. It was as if he knew that he was in a dream, but also had the sense of being in a real environment. Although the surroundings were very dark, Xiao Xian could still make out the rough outline of the surrounding trees and rocks. He just couldn't see them in detail. Rustle, rustle, it seemed to be the sound of the wind blowing. Amidst the rustling of the grass and trees, there was another sound. It wasn't obvious and was difficult to distinguish among the various sounds. If one's hearing wasn't good enough, they might not be able to hear it. In the dense grass, something was moving quickly. It whizzed past Xiao Xian not far away. Xiao Xian only saw a blurry shadow running into the distance like the wind. He could even feel the waves of air as the shadow ran past. Without thinking too much, Xiao Xian hurriedly chased after the sound. Based on his intuition, he felt that it should be his target. That figure ran very fast. In the dense forest, it moved freely without any hindrance. Moreover, its movements were very quiet. They ran out of the dense grassy area, past a stone field, across a small stream, and into a forest. The shape of the trees there was strange. They were crooked, like weeping willows that had been shaken by a strong wind. They looked like they would fall with just a little more pressure. However, due to the dim surroundings, Xiao Xian couldn't see clearly. As Xiao Xian chased after the sound, he heard a crunching sound in front of him. It sounded like the sound of something being chewed quickly. Occasionally, there was the sound of grass being torn apart. Xiao Xian wanted to take a closer look, but the figure quickly left. It continued to move at the same speed as before, shuttling through the forest. It would occasionally stop to rest, and then there would be the sound of chewing again. All of a sudden, Xiao Xian's muscles tensed up as a strong sense of danger washed over him. From where the chewing sound came from, a pair of glowing green eyes looked over and stared straight in Xiao Xian's direction. Xiao Xian couldn't see what the eyes looked like, but he could feel a murderous aura coming straight at him. He didn't have time to think. The pair of glowing eyes in the dark lowered, no longer looking in his direction. However, the murderous aura grew stronger. Xiao Xian wanted to avoid it, but his body remained in place, facing the rapidly approaching figure. In the dark night, it seemed like a sharp sword was coming straight at him. In the next moment, he felt like his entire body would be pierced through. Whoosh! Xiao Xian suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. The feeling of almost being pierced through by a sharp blade in his dream was still clear in his mind. His tense muscles made his body slightly stiff. "What's wrong, Xiao Xian?" My Duo Kong and the others heard the noise and quickly asked. During the day, Xiao Xian's analysis of the traps made many people unable to sleep at night. They were thinking about all kinds of things, including the 4 people from Yanjiao. Even if they did sleep, they couldn't sleep well. Xiao Xian sat up so suddenly that it scared the sleepy people awake. They thought they were being attacked. "I'm fine," Xiao Xian raised his hand to wipe his forehead. His hand was covered in cold sweat, and he was still panting. "You don't look like you're fine," another voice in the cave said. It was a person from the Thousand Masks tribe. Xiao Xian ignored him and said to Duo Kong and the others, "It was just a dream." When the others in the cave heard Xiao Xian's words, they only thought that Xiao Xian was probably thinking too much. It was probably a nightmare. They didn't expect this kid to be so cowardly. Seeing Xiao Xian lie down again, looking like he wanted to go back to sleep, the others didn't ask any more questions. It was just a nightmare. Who hadn't had nightmares before? Especially after entering the ferocious beast mountain forest, they often had nightmares about being eaten by ferocious beasts or being swallowed by those strange plants. However, that was only the beginning. Later on, it became much better. After all, those who were able to follow along were all people with decent strength in their respective tribes. Knowing that Xiao Xian could also be scared awake by nightmares, the young warriors from the other tribes felt much better. Xiao Xian, this kid, could also be scared. Hee hee. Only, while the others felt better, the 4 people from Yanjiao felt their hearts in their throats. After experiencing some things, they knew that Xiao Xian's dream wasn't an ordinary dream. When Xiao Xian was hunting with the advance party, he saw the green thief in his dreams. When he was on the other side of the sea, Xiao Xian dreamt of his ancestors and the place where he crossed the sea. All of these were great inspirations and guidance. Now, hearing Xiao Xian say that he was dreaming, the 4 people from Yanjiao wanted to ask, but considering the others in the cave, they could only hold back their questions. Because of Xiao Xian's words, the 4 people from Yanjiao were all awake. The others in the cave could also feel that the people from Yanjiao weren't calm. In the ground below the cave, some unknown creatures were wriggling. Their voices passed through the stones at the bottom of the cave and reached everyone's ears. Those creatures didn't come close, so they weren't a threat for the time being, but they could always stir up their nerves. In the forest outside the cave, the roars of nocturnal beasts could be heard a little further away. In the dark of night, the forest was still full of fighting. Xiao Xian opened his eyes and looked at the dark cave. The forest at night was a little cold, and the warmth from the stone at the bottom of the cave calmed him down a lot. He carefully recalled every detail of the dream, recalling it over and over again, memorizing it. Green-faced fanged beasts? The ones in the dream were the green-faced fanged beasts, right? Unfortunately, in the dream, not only was the vision dim, but it also seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog. No matter what vision he used, he couldn't see clearly. He could only see the rough outline of his surroundings. This place was really different. Xiao Xian spent the rest of the night recalling the details of the dream, as well as the murderous aura. If the ones in the dream were really the green-faced fanged beasts, then it could explain why they were so hard to catch. They were too fast, had strong attacks, and were very alert. It would be strange if they were easy to catch. Xiao Xian had already searched the mountain where they were resting. According to his memory, the place in the dream wasn't here. If it wasn't here, then where was it? The next day, after a simple breakfast, the people from each tribe separated and set off. The 5 people from Yanjiao did the same. They didn't say much and followed Xiao Xian. They knew that Xiao Xian must have found something. Chapter 542. After Xiao Xian went down the mountain, he began to look around. He didn't know which mountain was the one he saw in his dream. The view from above was wider, so Xiao Xian borrowed the Hui tribe's giant mountain eagle to look around. Unfortunately, from above, he couldn't see which mountain was special. There wasn't much difference between the few mountains he saw from above. These giant mountain eagles were obviously wary of and didn't trust people from the Hui tribe as much as they did people from the Hui tribe. After a round of searching, the giant mountain eagle named Shan Dao, who was carrying Xiao Xian on his back, began to get impatient. It called out a few times, urging Xiao Xian to finish looking. Gula tried to appease Shan Dao a few times, but unfortunately, the giant mountain eagles had a temper. This was the most they could tolerate after compromising. They already felt uncomfortable here, and now they had to carry someone they didn't trust on their back. They had to walk around in circles in a place that made them feel uncomfortable. It would be strange if they were in a good mood. Xiao Xian drew on the animal skin roll all the places he suspected to be in his dream. Trees, streams, mountains, etc. As long as they looked similar, he marked them all. When he was almost done, Xiao Xian got down from the eagle's back. The 3 eagles of the Hui tribe weren't Cha-Cha, so Xiao Xian couldn't make them cooperate all the time. He could see that the 3 eagles were very afraid of this place. It wasn't because they sensed danger, but because they felt uncomfortable. After he finished drawing, Xiao Xian didn't force them anymore. He thanked Gula, and Xiao Xian led the 4 people from the Yanjiao to search according to the places marked on the map. They couldn't be sure where it was, so they could only use the method of searching mountain by mountain. At first, some people wanted to follow Xiao Xian, but when they saw Xiao Xian and the others looking around aimlessly, they lost their patience and didn't continue to follow them. The 5 of them quickly shuttled through the woods. Xiao Xian ran at the front, his eyes sweeping around. If he found a marked place, he would stop to take a look. If he couldn't find it, he would change to another place. After searching 3 mountains, the 5 of them stopped to rest. The forest was quieter than the other places they had passed. The place where they stopped was even quieter. They could only hear some birds and insects chirping, and the faint roars of beasts in the distance. The most obvious sound was the heavy breathing of the 5 people due to the continuous running. With their physiques, they wouldn't be this tired even if they chased their prey for several days, as long as they didn't have to fight with fearsome beasts. Along the way, they did not encounter many ferocious beasts, let alone giant ones. As long as they were careful of the plants and animals hiding in the shadows, they would be fine. They were already used to hunting in the mountains and forests. The animal and plant crisis here was nothing to them, but they felt tired. Very tired. It's so hot. Duo Kong sighed. Last winter, they were almost buried in the snow. But this winter, it was unbearably hot on this side of the sea. Two extremes. Xiao Xian stood up from the rock and looked around at the forest. There were some hidden eyes watching them. They were just predators hiding in the bushes. They were the smarter ones in the forest. They were judging and measuring the fighting power of Xiao Xian and the others. If they felt that they could attack, they would probably take action. But now, they were still hesitating. Xiao Xian and the others were too strong. They didn't dare to act rashly. Xiao Xian didn't look at the figures hiding in the bushes. He just kept his guard up. But most of his attention was on the surroundings. Is it really because of the weather that you feel tired? Xiao Xian asked. When they first saw this place, they noticed the difference. The plants here were fresher and fresher. The air seemed to be very fresh, and every breath made people feel refreshed. However, that was only the beginning. The more intense the exercise, the longer the duration, the more suffocating it felt. Even if they breathed hard, they would still feel tired easily. When Xiao Xian said that, the other four also felt that something was wrong. Now I believe that there is a green-faced fanged beast here, Mai smiled. To him, the more special the beast was, the more special the place it lived in. Let's go, let's keep looking. Duo Kong moved his sore muscles and became more excited. To him, finding the green-faced fanged beast was the most important thing. Compared to stone weapons, he preferred the clanging sound of metal weapons. However, after using Heng's metal weapons, he was not used to using lower-quality weapons. He would rather use weapons made from high-quality stone than low-quality metal weapons. It was not convenient for him. Soon, once he found the green-faced fanged beast, he would be able to make better metal weapons to make up for the difference in technology. Duo Kang's heart was burning. He didn't care about the fatigue. It wasn't just him, the others felt the same. So what if they knew something was wrong here? They had to keep looking. The five of them continued to search for the next location. When they reached the 8th mountain, Xiao Xian suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. It was his first time here, but why did it feel so familiar? There was only one reason: he had seen it in his dream. The scenery in his dream was very blurry. The forest here was not very different from the places they had searched before. The distribution of species, the density of the trees, the height of the grass, etc. But now, Xiao Xian stood in the middle of the forest and the sense of familiarity grew stronger. It's here. Xiao Xian's words made the four of them excited. Following the familiar feeling, Xiao Xian slowly compared every place with the scenery in his dream. The originally dim background in his memory started to brighten up. The different shades of green perfectly matched the dim outline in his dream. Just then, he heard the sound of shuttling quickly. Moving forward, Xiao Xian stopped and looked around. Pushing aside the grass, he saw the lightly scented grass that he had taken when he dismantled the trap. It wasn't complete grass. If he hadn't deliberately searched here, Xiao Xian wouldn't have noticed it because it was only a little bit above the ground, as if it had been bitten off by something. This was bitten by the green-faced fanged beast? Duo Kang's voice trembled with excitement as he stared at Xiao Xian, waiting for him to give an answer. It should be. Without seeing the final target, Xiao Xian couldn't be sure, but in his heart, he was 70% sure. There was no definite answer, but this already made Duo Kong and the others very happy. Sure enough, Xiao Xian's dream wasn't in vain. Although he wanted to find the target quickly, he couldn't rush it. Duo Kong followed beside Xiao Xian, guarding the surroundings and dealing with the threats that emerged from the grass so that Xiao Xian could focus on the road. Walking out of the forest, Xiao Xian saw the stream that wasn't deep, and he seemed to hear the sound of flowing water in his dream. When he stepped into the water, Xiao Xian felt that something was wrong. The sound was wrong. The sound of flowing water in his dream was softer. Could it be that he had stepped on stones? That couldn't be right. There were no stones in the middle of the stream to step on, but Xiao Xian couldn't find a reasonable answer to explain it, so he could only skip this part. After crossing the stream and seeing the crooked trees, Xiao Xian was no longer suspicious. Looking from the air, he couldn't see the shape of the trees. He could only see the dense foliage, so it was difficult to find this forest. Standing on the ground, it was different. The crooked trunks were clearly displayed in his field of vision. This was the place. There was no mistake. The stench of rotting flesh wafted through the air. There were also the threatening roars of birds and beasts. The five of them looked at each other and walked over with light footsteps. They were getting closer and closer to the place where they had been attacked in the dream. The stench of rotting flesh was also getting stronger. The scavenger birds pecked at each other, fighting for food. Some small beasts roared and chased away the birds that had landed. Their behavior caused another scuffle. There were also some flying insects the size of bees wandering around. There was a 2-meter-tall beast carcass. In this area, it was considered large, but its body was thin and long. When it stood upright, it was about 7 or 8 meters tall. Now, less than a quarter of the carcass had been eaten. It was impossible to see what the beast looked like when it was alive. The birds, beasts, and insects all surrounded the carcass to fight for food. Xiao Xian didn't go over. It wasn't wise to go over now. It would attract the attention of the scavenger animals. Beasts would also go crazy when protecting their food. When the carcass was almost finished, the birds gradually flew away. The beasts that had eaten their fill left one by one. The insects on the ground were also almost gone. Xiao Xian approached the carcass. Waving the weapon in his hand, he chased away the flying insects. Xiao Xian looked at the carcass in front of him. There were only bones left. It was here that he had been attacked. No, to be precise, perhaps the one that had been attacked wasn't Xiao Xian. At that time, the one that had been attacked was probably this dead beast. There was a bone plate in front of the beast's chest. It should have been used for protection. However, Xiao Xian saw a round hole in the bone plate. The bone plate was used for protection, but it had been easily pierced through. It was clear that the sharp weapon, as well as the speed and strength of the attack. No wonder he had felt the danger of the sharp blade in the dream. This should be it. There are only some fresh bite marks on the bones. It should have been bitten by the scavenger animals. Other than that, I don't see any other wounds, Mai analyzed after looking at the carcass. It doesn't look like there was a fight around here. Tuo glanced at the surrounding forest with doubt. It was a fatal blow. Xiao Xian pointed at the round hole. If it was really the green-faced fanged beast that killed it, we have to be more careful. The green-faced fanged beast didn't eat meat. That was why it left after killing the beast and left the carcass to the scavenger animals. Do you think the reason why there are fewer large beasts in this area is because all the threatening beasts have been slaughtered? Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but shudder. Chapter 543. Xiao Xian did not find any other evidence. That was the end of his dream. However, being able to find these traces was already a very big progress. It was much more reliable than burying his head in searching aimlessly. Xiao Xian and the other 4 walked around and found a few more traces of the grass that the green-faced fanged beast liked to eat. However, they were all gnawed to the point where only a small part of the grass was left. After marking them on a rough map, Xiao Xian removed the bone plate with a hole from the beast carcass and walked back with Duo Kong and the others. On the way back to the mountain where they rested, Xiao Xian felt someone watching them from afar. However, when Xiao Xian looked over, that person quickly left. His speed wasn't any slower than Robber Seven's, and his observation was much sharper. Xiao Xian had only turned his head slightly, and before he could even turn around, that person had already fled at full speed. Duo Kong saw Xiao Xian's reaction and guessed that someone was nearby. He became alert. Who is it? It should be someone from Robber 7. He's not any worse than Robber 7. Maybe he's even ranked higher in Robber 7, Xiao Xian said and did not chase after him. Instead, he carried the bone plate and continued to walk back. After Xiao Xian and the other 4 left, the person who had run far away waited for a while before circling back. He then followed the path that Xiao Xian and the other 4 went until he saw the dismantled beast carcass. He didn't see what Xiao Xian and the other 4 did here. When he came to the area, he saw Xiao Xian and the other 4 leaving with a bone. He was also surprised to see someone from Yinjiao. The person looked at the beast carcass carefully and then looked around. The grass that had been trampled on quickly gathered back together, but there were still faint traces left. From these traces, he could find the grass that had been gnawed to the point where only a small section was left. Seeing this, the person intertwined his fingers in a strange position to form the shape of a conch. Then, he blew into it. A series of beast-like snoring noises rang out. They weren't sharp, but rather deep, and spread far and wide. Not long after, 2 more figures came over. They were like agile monkeys jumping around in the forest. Have you found it? The person who had just arrived asked. No, I just found something. The person who sent the signal just now told him what he had seen. That should be it. The Yinjiao people are really good at finding wild beasts. Then should we inform Shishir? Someone asked. Don't tell him for the time being. I'm worried that he won't be able to hold himself back and bring people here. That will affect the tribesmen's search. Let's wait for the tribesmen to find them first. Compared to the slaves, they felt that the tribesmen would move faster. It's best if the tribesmen find the green-faced fanged beast first, then we can steal it from the tribesmen, someone said sneakily. They like to look for treasures, but they like to steal things from others even more. That would make them happier. While they were discussing the plan, Xiao Xian's group of 5 had already returned to their resting place. It was already dark. The other people who went out to search had already returned, but they didn't see the 5 Yinjiao people. Gula and the others were worried, so they rode an eagle out to search. When they saw Xiao Xian's group, they returned together. What's this? Gula asked when he saw Xiao Xian holding a bone with a hole in it. I found this thing today. I suspect that the hole was made by the green-faced fanged beast. Xiao Xian didn't tell them about the dream. He only told them about the results of today's search. Even if they didn't live a hunting life before, the other tribesmen had a general understanding of the hardness of beast bones. Not to mention, after entering the fearsome beast forest and killing many fearsome beasts, they could give an accurate evaluation. Although this bone plate was considered hard, it was barely enough to be used as a shield. Even so, it wasn't easy to poke a hole in it. Not to mention, the hole in the bone plate didn't seem to have any signs of stopping. It was pierced with a whoosh, and there were no cracks or small gaps. Only one hole? It's definitely not the horn of the green-faced fanged beast. As I said before, the green-faced fanged beast has hooves but no horns. If the hole was really made by the green-faced fanged beast, then it should be its teeth, Huang Yi analyzed. But even if the green-faced fanged beast caused all this, there's only one hole. Didn't Xiao Xian also say that the green-faced fanged beast has 2 pointed teeth? Chu Su asked. Maybe it only has 1 tooth, Huang Yi guessed. For them, the purpose of this trip was to figure out what the slave owners wanted and what they wanted to do. Now, they were just waiting to catch a green-faced fanged beast and bring it back for research. No matter what the truth was, and whether the hole in the bone plate was made by the green-faced fanged beast, everyone had to be vigilant. If it could easily poke a hole in the bone plate, it would be even easier to poke a human. At night, some people still slept in the trees outside the cave, some slept in the cave, and the rest took turns to be on guard. As the night deepened, the surroundings began to quiet down. The insects seemed to have shut up, and it was particularly quiet. Rustle, rustle, it was like the sound of the wind blowing the waves of grass with a rhythmic rhythm. In such a dark night, there was a strange sense of calmness. This kind of night made people sleepy. Among the swaying grass and the sound of the branches colliding with each other, there was a sound that was not obvious. It was coming closer to the mountain. The warrior on guard looked in that direction but did not find anything. There was only the movement of the thick grass swaying with the wind. He stared for a few seconds before turning to leave. Just as he turned around, a pair of eyes with a dim light appeared from the grass. The warrior who had just taken 2 steps felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The feeling of being targeted by a prey was like being in an ice cellar. He quickly turned to look in that direction and threw a spear in his hand. The spear pierced into the grass, and the people on guard only saw a figure flash in the dark forest and disappear in the blink of an eye. "What was that?" one person asked. "I don't know. Could it be the green-faced fanged beast?" another warrior asked. "No way. The green-faced fanged beast came here by itself? I didn't see it clearly. Maybe it's just an ordinary beast in the forest." "Let's build a fence tomorrow," someone suggested. "I think we should build one too," the warriors on guard whispered to each other. After the figure left the mountain, it passed through the forest and came to another mountain. Finally, it stopped and raised its head slightly, as if it was sniffing something in the air. It smelled a fragrance that it liked. Then, like the wind, it passed through the forest until it came to the place where the fragrance came from. There was a trap there. It was similar to the one the tribesmen took back the other day, but the workmanship was better. In the trap, there was a small bunch of grass tied to it. It was the source of the fragrance. The figure stopped there for a moment, then slowly walked in that direction. The next day, the slaves from Rock Hill City routinely checked the traps and found that the grass tied to the trap was gone. The trap had been activated before, but it was broken again. The people from Rock Hill City reported this to Shur. Shur was very happy. Even if they didn't catch it, it was good as long as there was news. He immediately ordered people to increase the range and number of traps. He also checked the trap that failed to catch the green-faced fanged beast to see what the problem was. If it didn't work, he would change the material. Chapter 544. The movements of the slaves naturally couldn't be hidden from the people of this tribe. Both sides had a tacit understanding. They knew of each other's existence, but they didn't take the initiative to attack. They rarely stepped into each other's mountains, but if there was any movement, they would know. They were secretly watching each other. "Did a green-faced fanged beast appear last night?" "I think so, but I don't know if they caught it yet. From the looks of it, they're setting up more traps." The elders of the other tribes were discussing. In fact, after studying the trap set by the people of Rock Hill City, the people of the Longbow tribe and Thousand Masks tribe also made a replica. They plucked more grass. The next day, when they heard that there was a green-faced fanged beast next door, they excitedly rushed over to see their own replica trap. Unfortunately, they only saw a smooth trap. Not a single strand of grass was left on it. Even the lasso on the trap was barely touched. The replica was only a replica. It was still a far cry from the real trap used to catch the green-faced fanged beast. Although they didn't catch it, they were sure that a green-faced fanged beast was here. When they thought of this, they became excited. They didn't care what the green-faced fanged beast was for, they just had to catch it and bring it back. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to calm down. The people of the Mang tribe and Eight Limbs tribe saw this and started to set up their own traps. However, they were resting on another mountain. The grass on this mountain was almost completely plucked. The traces of human activity were too obvious. If they set up a trap, it wouldn't be effective. The people of the Feather tribe used 3 days to train a bird that lived nearby. When they chose to set up traps with the Longboat tribe, they also trained a bird that moved at night. They planned to let the bird spy on them. They were good at this skill. The 5 people from Yanjiao moved together with the Hui tribe. They borrowed their eagle and flew to the place where they found the animal bones yesterday. The animal bones that were relatively complete yesterday were now only a few pieces left. More than half of it was gone. They didn't know what ate it. Xiao Xian didn't look at the animal bones anymore. He glanced around and took out a straw rope. The people of the Hui tribe were in the sky, so they couldn't see what was happening here. There were only 5 Yanjiao people in the forest. If there was any movement, they would inform the people in the sky. Not divination was not a panacea. Most of the time, it was impossible to perform a successful divination on the unknown. However, the clues he had gained over the past few days were increasing, especially the activation of the traps at Rock Hill City last night. This confirmed Xiao Xian's conjecture. This time, he should be able to divine it. He entered the state of divination, and the rope around his finger moved. A moment later, Xiao Xian looked at the knot on the rope and walked forward. He blew a wooden whistle to signal the people in the air to follow. If a person were to step on the grass in such a place, they would more or less leave some traces, which could not be completely recovered in a short period of time, just like how the robbers could find their way by following the traces left behind. However, wherever the green-faced fanged beasts walked, there were no traces of them. Other than the grass that had been bitten off and trampled on, it was difficult to find any other signs of their activity. As Xiao Xian walked in the direction indicated by the divination, he thought about the reason behind it. Other than the ancestors of the slave masters in Rock Hill City, no one else here had seen the green-faced fanged beast. There was a limit to what they could deduce from the traps. Moreover, the traps set by the Rock Hill City people were not perfect. Otherwise, the green-faced fanged beasts wouldn't have escaped. Yes, before coming here, Xiao Xian lurked around the slaves who set up the traps and heard bits and pieces of what they were talking about. Although they didn't say it out loud, Xiao Xian could roughly guess what was going on. What was so special about the green-faced fanged beast that the Wuxia tribe would choose it for? Why couldn't the blood of other beasts be used, but their blood could? Thinking about it, they went down the mountain and went around a few mountains in the valley. Then, they came to another mountain that didn't look special. The trees, flowers, birds, and insects here weren't much different from the other mountains. The only difference was probably in front of them. Not long after Xiao Xian went up the mountain, they saw a patch of dense grass that reached their shoulders. There were trees around, but there weren't many ancient trees. The thickest tree had a trunk as thick as 4 or 5 people. This was nothing compared to the fearsome beast forest. Although it wasn't thick or old enough, it was very tall. There were many branches on the tree, and the thin branches and dense leaves covered most of the sky above. The grass here was much taller and denser than other places. It seemed like the grass had an advantage over the trees. If Xiao Xian and the rest went into the grass under the shade of the trees, they would only be able to poke their heads out. There weren't any insects around. Other than the eagles of the Hui tribe, there were no other birds in the sky. It seemed like they were avoiding this place on purpose. Duo Kong was about to ask when Xiao Xian raised his hand to stop him. Listening carefully, the sound of grass waves blown by the mountain wind was rustling, and in the midst of the rustling of the dense grass leaves, there was a sound like boiling steam spurting out of a slit. The sound wasn't loud, so it wasn't obvious here. But if people with good hearing listened carefully, they would be able to tell. Xiao Xian pointed in a direction and gave the 4 of them a look. Needless to say, Duo Kong and the rest ran in 2 different directions. Xiao Xian went straight in one direction. They didn't go straight into the grass. There would be too much movement if they went in. Also, the grass was too thick and blocked their line of sight. There was no way to know what was hiding under the thick grass. Xiao Xian and the rest used the tree branches as support and approached from above. Xiao Xian and the rest planned to approach slowly and quietly. Then, they would surround the person hiding in the grass and catch him. However, as soon as they moved, a figure jumped out of the grass and ran away with its back facing Xiao Xian and the rest. Xiao Xian had calculated the approximate size and back height of the green-faced fanged beast based on the trap set by the people of Rock Hill City. If there was a green-faced fanged beast here, it should be completely buried in the grass. After all, according to Xiao Xian's calculation, the taller green-faced fanged beast should only reach their chest. However, Xiao Xian and the rest could barely stick their heads out of the grass, let alone a green-faced fanged beast that was shorter than them. However, the figure that suddenly jumped out of the grass was much taller than the grass. It wasn't a green-faced fanged beast? Did they guess wrong? The moment they saw the figure jump out, Duo Kong and the rest hesitated for a moment. Only Xiao Xian didn't stop. That's it. Chase! Xiao Xian shouted. That's it? The one that was so much taller than the grass? No, that's not right. It wasn't taller than the grass because of its size, but because it was directly on top of the grass. It was really running. Yang Guang was projected from the gaps between the branches, forming beams of light that crisscrossed under the forest. A figure with green stripes on his body was running like the wind, stepping on the waves of grass. Chapter 545. Xiao Xian and the other four followed closely behind. When Duo Kong and the other three saw the green-faced fanged beast, they hesitated for a moment, but in that moment, they were already far behind. The prey in front of them was getting faster and faster, ignoring the trees and bushes. Whether it was the thick bushes or the surrounding trees, it didn't affect its speed at all. On the one hand, it could walk on the grass. On the other hand, it seemed to be very familiar with this area. It knew how to run and where to run, like a fish swimming in water. Behind it, Xiao Xian couldn't see its hooves clearly because it was moving too fast. He could only see the waves of grass under its hooves swaying as it ran. Every time it swayed, it was like a wave that pushed the beast to escape at a faster speed. In the sky, Gula and the others from the Hui tribe heard Xiao Xian's shout and chased after the figure below. Although there were many branches in the forest, blocking most of the view from the sky, there were still many gaps for Gula to see the figure running below. Even if Gula and the others couldn't see clearly, with the giant mountain eagle's eyesight, they could still lock onto the fleeing figure. But the prey seemed to know that there was a predator in the sky, so it ran towards a denser forest instead of an open area. Xiao Xian and the other four couldn't stop it for the time being. The people in the sky could only keep up, but they couldn't catch it. They could only watch as it ran into the denser forest. Screech, the giant mountain eagle in the sky screeched unwillingly. After the prey ran into the denser forest, it couldn't chase anymore. Losing sight of the prey, the eagle circled in the sky, not knowing where to go. Gula cursed and signaled the giant mountain eagle to fly lower. He jumped down from the eagle's back and entered the forest with Duo Kong and the other three who had just caught up. There were still 3 people from the Hui tribe watching from the sky. If they saw anything, they would alert the people below. The only one missing was Xiao Xian. Because only Xiao Xian could catch up. Xiao Xian was still able to keep up by stepping on tree trunks, but Duo Kong and the rest were left behind. Now that they had lost their target, no one would be in a good mood. Was that the green-faced fanged beast? Gula asked. If Xiao Xian said so, then it must be. I didn't expect the green-faced fanged beast to be able to run on grass. Duo Kong panted. This was as difficult as catching a thief. If he wasn't careful, he would lose his chance. He was so close. I shouldn't have hesitated. Grass running? Previously, Gula was above and could not see the situation below clearly. When he landed, he could no longer see the figure. Now that he heard Duo Kang's words, Gula was truly shocked. He had only seen those with wings flying on the grass. How could the green-faced fanged beast have such an ability? Duo Kong and the others didn't know much. In fact, they only saw a blurry silhouette and didn't see the green-faced fanged beast's full appearance. Duo Kong and the others only knew this much more than Guladu. However, now was not the time to talk about it. Split up and search. In such a large forest, they couldn't find any traces of Zhang Xian, so they had no choice but to split up to search. Hopefully, Xiao Xian could catch up to the green-faced fanged beast. The four of them thought to themselves. Previously, Xiao Xian was able to catch a thief. Now, he should be able to catch up to the green-faced fanged beast, right? Xiao Xian did indeed catch up. However, this was not Yanjiao's territory that he was familiar with. The geographical advantage was more advantageous for the green-faced fanged beast. All he could do was not to be left behind and find an opportunity to tell the others. During the chase, Xiao Xian couldn't be distracted to leave tracking marks for Xiao Xian and the others. The path of the figure in front of them was too tricky. If he wasn't careful, he might even hit a tree. In the dense forest, the two figures ran one after the other. Sometimes, when they changed directions too quickly, Xiao Xian would leave footprints on the tree trunks and even break branches. However, this kind of situation was rare and couldn't leave a continuous trace for the people behind. A bug beast that was sleeping in the grass was stomped on by Xiao Xian, who jumped down from the tree trunk. When it stood up and angrily looked around, Xiao Xian's figure was already gone. Running out of a mountain, through a valley, to another mountain, and then over another mountain, the figure in front of them was still running tirelessly and didn't show any signs of slowing down. Just when Xiao Xian thought that this would be a long chase, the running figure in front of them suddenly stopped as if it had stepped on the brakes. Xiao Xian didn't dare to approach immediately. He had limited knowledge of the green-faced fanged beast. When he didn't know their attacking habits, Xiao Xian would keep a relatively safe distance from it, especially when he knew that it could easily kill a beast that was much bigger than it. Previously, he was only focused on chasing and didn't care about anything else. Now that it had stopped, Xiao Xian realized that the one in front of him seemed to be a little fat. No, it wasn't fat. It was more like it had eaten too much. It had 4 short and wide hooves, a round belly, and green patterns on its body. The colors were of different shades, and there was no pattern to it. Its entire face was completely green. There were no other colors. It looked like an animal like a cow or a sheep, but there were obvious differences. On both sides of its wide jaw, there was a tusk that grew diagonally upwards. On the other side, there was only a small section. It must have been broken for some reason. There was only one tusk. The carcass that Xiao Xian found must have been killed by this beast. It looked at Xiao Xian fiercely without any fear. It didn't roar, only a very gloomy silence. Whoosh! There was the sound of blowing air. Hot air came out of the green-faced fanged beast's 2 large nostrils. In its slightly open mouth, there were no sharp teeth. Those weren't teeth for eating meat, they were for grinding grass. Xiao Xian recalled what Gong Jiaheng had described to him. Its face is green and it has very thick skin. It often moves in the mountains. It's fierce and likes to attack other beasts. It eats grass. Although he had hunted many animals in the forest in the past, and many of them looked very similar to this beast, Xiao Xian had denied it at first glance. However, when he saw this beast, Xiao Xian had a feeling that this was it. This green-faced fanged beast must have known that it had shaken off the others. There was no eagle in the sky, only Xiao Xian was there. It must have thought that the danger was over. Now, it chose to face him head-on. Its eyes glinted fiercely. It lowered its head and pointed its tusk at Xiao Xian, signaling it to attack. It did not make any other unnecessary movements. Instead, it stomped on the ground with its 4 stubby hooves and leapt into the air, charging towards Xiao Xian. It was just like the attack Xiao Xian saw in his dream. Xiao Xian had to be careful when facing a beast that could easily break through the bones of the beasts in the forest. He had already blown the wooden whistle and the sound of birds chirping could be heard. However, he didn't know when Duo Kong and the rest would arrive. Before that, he had to deal with it himself. Chapter 546. The green-faced fanged beast ran at high speed, creating a whistling sound as it ran. It turned into a green light and rushed straight towards Xiao Xian. Although its body looked round and heavy, it gave people the feeling that it could float. Xiao Xian did not retreat immediately. He pulled his abdomen back and twisted his upper body to the side with his knees to avoid the fierce attack. At the same time, he twisted his wrist holding the hilt of the sword. The sword drew a bright light and slashed towards the green-faced fanged beast. It looked like he was about to cut off the beast's head. Unexpectedly, this ferocious beast was not only fast, but also very agile. When Xiao Xian's sword was about to cut down, it jumped up and turned its body, twisting its head and using its tusks to block the blade. Clang! The beast's fangs collided with the blade directly, but it did not break. It only left a small dent. The green-faced fanged beast did not expect Xiao Xian's weapon to be such a threat to it. After being hit by the rebound force, it bounced up like a rubber ball. It quickly moved its hooves to increase the distance between them. It stopped 20 steps away from Xiao Xian and glared at Xiao Xian fiercely. Xiao Xian wasn't sure if it was his own illusion, but the green on the green-faced fanged beast's face seemed to have deepened. Coupled with the murderous look in its eyes and the strange wrinkles on its face, it looked even more ferocious and ferocious. In fact, Xiao Xian knew that if he wanted to get the blood of the green-faced fanged beast for casting, it would be best to capture it alive. The trap set by the people of Rock Hill City was to capture it alive, not to kill it. However, in this situation, he knew that this beast was very aggressive. When it attacked, it would kill. Xiao Xian was not sure if he could capture it alive easily. Chi, the green-faced fanged beast breathed out hot air from its two big nostrils again and stomped its hooves. Obviously, it had no intention of letting Xiao Xian go. Its sharp fangs appeared in front of Xiao Xian in the blink of an eye. Xiao Xian didn't dare to be careless. When he thought of the beast's corpse, he had a feeling that if he was pierced by the teeth, no matter if he was a human or a beast, no matter if he was a junior or senior totem warrior, or if he was pierced by the teeth, he would definitely die. There was no evidence, but his intuition told him otherwise. The rushing body brought with it a strong gust of wind. It was just a gust of wind, but Xiao Xian felt as if he had been smashed by a wooden plank. Still not retreating, Xiao Xian didn't even try to dodge this time. Instead, he used his sword to block this lightning-fast attack. The sharp, steel-like fangs pierced the sword, producing a sharp sound. The tip of the fangs slid across the sword, producing a brief zang sound. Xiao Xian gritted his teeth, the veins on his sword arm bulging. The beast's charging force was very strong. It wasn't that it was strong, it was just too fast. With its speed, every charge was like a cannonball. Even if it didn't have fangs, it wasn't something an ordinary person could withstand. Plus, it had a sharp, steel-like fangs. Hang's special sword could only leave a shallow mark on its fangs. Since the attack failed, the green-faced fanged beast decided to retreat again. It didn't want to continue fighting. Seeing this, Xiao Xian had an idea. However, it was just a guess, he couldn't be sure. Clang! Clang! The third attack, the fourth attack, the idea in Xiao Xian's mind grew stronger and stronger. After blocking these 4 attacks, Xiao Xian had a feeling that the green-faced fanged beast was very light. It wasn't as heavy as it looked. It probably wasn't good at close combat, preferring to attack from a distance. It relied on its speed and fangs to deliver a fatal blow to its prey. That was why it had chosen to temporarily retreat several times after failing to hit its target with a single strike. However, it was just a guess. To be sure, he had to prove it. The green-faced fanged beast's 4th attack did not hit its target, so it started to go berserk. Its nostrils, which were much bigger than Xiao Xian's fists, were spewing out hot air like boiling water. After that, it moved its hooves again for the 5th attack. With the experience from the previous 4 attacks, Xiao Xian calmly blocked the attack this time. He didn't want to give it a chance to run away. He exerted force on the soles of his feet and rushed in the direction where the green-faced fanged beast was retreating. The muscles on his arm that wasn't holding the sword jumped with the increase of totem power. He flipped his wrist and grabbed the long fangs of the green-faced fanged beast. He exerted force, trying to throw the beast to the ground. If he wanted to catch it alive, he had to make it unconscious first. Light. This was Xiao Xian's first thought. Slippery. This was Xiao Xian's second thought. The green-faced fanged beast wasn't as heavy as it looked. Xiao Xian was already mentally prepared for this. He also guessed it, so he wasn't surprised. If it wasn't so light, how could it run on the grass? It didn't have wings like a bird. In addition, Xiao Xian didn't expect the fangs in his hand to be so slippery. After all, the fangs didn't look smooth. There were even a lot of scratches made by Xiao Xian's sword. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be so slippery. However, the fangs in his hand that should have been controlled were like slippery loaches. As the green-faced fanged beast struggled, it escaped his control. Sensing that something was wrong, Xiao Xian quickly retracted his hand. If Xiao Xian hadn't retracted his hand quickly, his hand would have been scratched by the fangs, or even worse. The green-faced fanged beast that escaped Xiao Xian's control stopped again. However, this time, it was further away from Xiao Xian. It was probably scared by Xiao Xian's actions just now. The green-faced fanged beast stared fiercely at Xiao Xian. Its dark pupils quickly contracted and dilated, and the wrinkles on its face increased. Just when Xiao Xian thought it was going to attack for the sixth time, the green-faced fanged beast moved its hooves, turned 180 degrees, and ran away. Running away when you can't win was the habit of most beasts and humans. It was also the most correct choice for survival. Duo Kong and the others hadn't come over yet. Xiao Xian blew the wooden whistle and quickly left a mark on the trunk next to him. Then, he continued to chase forward. It was rare to encounter a green-faced fanged beast, so he couldn't just let it go. However, when it came to running, the green-faced fanged beast with a round belly was really hard to catch. It ran to places with many trees and grass. Its hooves were like the wind as it stepped on the thick grass. It was Xiao Xian's first time encountering such a difficult beast. Because it didn't have a fixed running route and direction, and because it was fast, Xiao Xian couldn't even throw a dart at it. However, the beast in front wouldn't run aimlessly, right? According to Xiao Xian's understanding, many beasts that lived in the mountains and forests had their own ways of avoiding danger. When they encountered a threat that they couldn't handle, they would run to places that were difficult to avoid, such as underground caves, rivers, tall trees, and so on. So, where was the green-faced fanged beast in front of him going? This place surrounded by green mountains was much larger than Xiao Xian thought. During the chase, Xiao Xian paid attention to the terrain so that he wouldn't get lost. During the chase, he found a lot of unfamiliar plants. Perhaps because of the unique environment, there were a lot of flowers and trees that Xiao Xian had never seen before. However, this was understandable. The only strange thing was that there were no large beasts, right? After chasing for such a long time, Xiao Xian had seen other larger beasts, but he had never seen a giant one. This was the same as what they found when they first entered this area. If it was really because of the green-faced fanged beast, then how many green-faced fanged beasts would it take to make it so difficult to even see a large beast in this area? Could it be that the one in front wanted to run back to its nest? If that was the case, Xiao Xian had to follow it even more closely. If it was an ordinary warrior, even if he could continue running, he would have slowed down and would not be able to maintain his full speed. Even for Xiao Xian, after chasing for so long, he was obviously tired. However, the green-faced fanged beast in front still maintained its extremely fast speed. The only thing that Xiao Xian heard was that the snorting sound was a little louder. How long is it going to run? Xiao Xian looked at the green-faced fanged beast running in front of him and thought. In front of the forest was a mountain wall. The green-faced fanged beast in front of them didn't slow down at all, nor did it change direction. Although it was still running around, its general direction was towards the mountain wall in front of them. Could it be that there was something on the mountain wall? Xiao Xian chased the figure in front of him out of the forest. He quickly glanced at the mountain wall in front of him and didn't find anything wrong. It was similar to the mountain walls in other places. No. Xiao Xian's gaze swept across the mountain wall and fell on a spot near the ground. There was a hole there, and the green-faced fanged beast that rushed out of the forest was heading towards that hole. Is that where it's heading? Xiao Xian didn't know how deep the hole in the mountain wall was, and he didn't know if there were other entrances or exits. If it really rushed in, he didn't know if he could catch it again. Although Xiao Xian really wanted to stop the green-faced fanged beast in front of him, he was still one step behind. He could only watch as it got closer and closer to the hole in the mountain wall. The long hair on its head was blown away by the wind. The front half of its body was slightly bent, and the fangs that were slightly higher than its head were tilted downwards. It folded its front hooves and shot towards the hole. Looking at the series of movements, he knew that it wasn't the first time it did this. It was very skilled. Huh! Xiao Xian slowed down his footsteps and stood there, watching the green-faced figure rush towards the hole in the mountain wall. Bang! There was a muffled sound like a hand hitting an empty bottle. Xiao Xian looked at the situation at the hole, and the muscles on his face twitched. He then lifted his feet and walked towards the hole. At the entrance of the cave on the mountain wall, the blue and white figure completely blocked the entrance. Half of it was still exposed outside. Its round belly was stuck at the entrance of the cave, and its folded front hooves were facing outwards. It was also stuck there, unable to exert any strength. Its hind legs that were exposed outside kicked hard, but its hooves were short, and its round belly was stuck there. It couldn't bend its body, so when its two hind hooves kicked, it was just short of the mountain wall. It couldn't exert any strength, so it could only kick in the air. Its short tail was circling around vigorously, and it seemed to be in a hurry. Chapter 547. Walking to the entrance of the cave, Xiao Xian looked at the lump that was blocking the entrance. He felt that the cave was a little too small, and this one was so fat. It would be a little too small for it to squeeze in, unless its body was soft and flexible. Sure enough, it was blocked, right? It was rushing so fast just now and was blocking the entrance even harder. If no one pulled it out, who knew how long it would be stuck there? Unless it was starving and skinny. It was said that the green-faced fanged beast's skin was very thick, but Xiao Xian saw that most of its fur was not long. The different shades of green intertwined and looked very messy. However, this color was indeed an excellent camouflage in the forest. Coupled with its reaction speed and attack power that were completely different from its body size, it might not be able to dominate this place, but at least it would be hard to find a worthy opponent. Xiao Xian didn't know if this green-faced fanged beast had fallen into the trap set by the tribesmen or Rock Hill City people. The only thing he could be sure of was that this was the one he saw in his dream. The green-faced fanged beast that was stuck there kicked its hooves and tried to move forward. Unfortunately, it was useless. It couldn't get out or squeeze in. Its tail was swinging faster and faster. It was probably really desperate. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have put in so much effort, said Xiao Xian. He had been studying the traps set by the Rock Hill City people for the past few days. He wanted to use those traps to catch the beast, but he didn't expect to encounter such a situation. Looking around, Xiao Xian planned to find some vines to tie this beast up. It would be a pity if he didn't take advantage of such a good opportunity. After taking 2 steps, Xiao Xian stopped and turned back to the entrance of the cave. He took out the white worm silk from his animal skin bag. Originally, he wanted to use the silk to set up the trap, but now he changed his mind. Xiao Xian didn't know if ordinary vines could tie it up, so it was safer to use the silk. The front hooves were already stuck, so Xiao Xian could only tie up the back hooves to prevent it from escaping after he pulled it out. The green-faced fanged beast was too fast and hard to catch up with. The green-faced fanged beast couldn't run, and its strength was not as good as Xiao Xian's. No matter how hard the green-faced fanged beast tried, it couldn't move. Xiao Xian wrapped the white worm silk in his hand around the green-faced fanged beast's hind legs and tied it up. After tying it up, Xiao Xian reached out and poked the beast's hide. He could feel the thickness of its hide, but there was something strange about it. Other than the thickness of its hide, there was something wrong with it. When he tied it up, there was a strange feeling. He reached out and pressed down. Xiao Xian continued to exert force, and his fingers sank in. He had already used his special vision to examine the beast. There was nothing wrong with its bones, and it was not pregnant. It had been running all the way here, so it should be very familiar with this place. If it could not squeeze in before, it would not have run so fast and so accurately. It was definitely not fat. Thinking about it, the only possibility was that it had eaten too much. However, it was rare for a beast to swell like this after eating too much. Xiao Xian had not seen many beasts like this in his years of hunting. Moreover, other beasts, even if they could have such a big change after eating too much, were different from this beast. They would not be so soft. This green-faced fanged beast's stomach seemed to be filled with air. After being poked a few times, the green-faced fanged beast struggled even more, but now, no matter how hard it struggled, it could not get out of the hole. Xiao Xian could hear the sound coming from inside the hole. It should be the green-faced fanged beast roaring. It sounded like the wind was blowing hard. Without waiting any longer, Xiao Xian made sure that it was tied up and stretched out his arms. His arms were like a clamp, clamping the beast's exposed torso outside the hole. His feet stepped on the wall of the hole, and his arms pulled out forcefully. Pop! With a soft sound, the green-faced fanged beast that was stuck in the hole was finally pulled out. Its first reaction when it was free was to twist its neck and stab Xiao Xian with its fangs. Unfortunately, Xiao Xian held onto its torso tightly. Before it could stab with its fangs, Xiao Xian pressed it to the ground, face down. Xiao Xian moved one hand to the back of its neck and used the other hand to tie its front legs and mouth with the white worm silk. Its hind legs could not move, it could not run, and it could not exert any strength. Its whole body was pressed to the ground. In terms of strength, it was no match for Xiao Xian, so it could only let Xiao Xian tie it up. After its front and back legs were tied up, the green-faced fanged beast lost its ability to move. At most, it could only roll on the ground. It kept breathing out from its nostrils, and its entire beast face looked gloomy. Why aren't they here yet? Xiao Xian blew the wooden whistle, but he still did not hear any response from Duo Kong and the others. There was also no sign of the Hui tribesmen in the sky. Did they not catch up? Or was there something else that prevented him from doing so? Since Duo Kong and the others did not come, Xiao Xian could only bring this green-faced fanged beast back. Looking at the sky, Xiao Xian lifted the green-faced fanged beast with its head facing outwards, not giving it a chance to stab him with its fangs. Just as he was about to go back the way he came, before entering the forest, Xiao Xian suddenly stopped in his tracks. In the dark forest, the grass swayed with the wind and the leaves rustled. Other than that, there seemed to be no other movement. However, Xiao Xian did not step into the forest again. Instead, he quickly retreated. Just as Xiao Xian retreated, there were a few whooshing sounds in the forest. 3 bone spurs as thick as fingers suddenly shot out from a tree. One of them pierced the spot where Xiao Xian was standing, while the other 2 shot behind Xiao Xian. Finally, they hit the mountain wall and made 2 crisp sounds. 2 figures suddenly appeared from the trees. Another 2 spear-like bone darts flew towards Xiao Xian. When they threw the bone darts, they did not stop. Instead, they also closed in on Xiao Xian. Although these 2 people were not as fast as the green-faced fanged beast, their movements were still quite light. The sound of them jumping on the tree trunk was very soft. People with bad hearing might not be able to hear them. Xiao Xian dodged the 2 bone darts. The approaching figures quickly enlarged in his eyes. He threw the green-faced fanged beast he was carrying up into the air. He held the sword in his other hand and swept it out. The sword made a whistling sound as it cut through the air. It was like a raging torrent. When he was facing the green-faced fanged beast, Xiao Xian still wanted to hold back a little. However, when facing these people, his attitude was different. When Xiao Xian moved, the two people changed their stance. One of them jumped up while the other was still facing Xiao Xian. They blocked Xiao Xian's sword. Clang! In the ear-piercing sound of metal hitting metal, the trembling sword reflected countless rays of light from Yangguang. It was as if a ball of light had suddenly exploded on the sword. The person who blocked Xiao Xian's sword had heard of the Yinjiao people's great strength before. He had also heard of the Yinjiao people's way of doing things. However, when he actually faced it, he clearly felt it. This sword with a sharp momentum brought about a brutal impact. It felt like the sword in his hand was about to be shaken out of his hand. However, the person's reaction was fast. When he blocked the sword, he was already prepared to retreat. He used the force of the rebound to retreat. After swinging his sword, Xiao Xian did not look at his opponent. Instead, he raised his hand and grabbed the tail of the green-faced fanged beast as if he had already planned it. When he threw the beast, he used force to make it head up and tail down. Above, the person who was about to touch the green-faced fanged beast suddenly found that the target that was thrown up was pulled back. Chapter 548. After pulling the prey back, Xiao Xian grabbed the green-faced fanged beast's tail and swung it at the person. On the beast's head, the long fangs were facing forward. Xiao Xian was using it as another weapon. Seeing that the target had been pulled back, the person realized the danger and twisted his body in the air. His waist and his entire chest quickly caved in. In an incredible way, he suddenly bent into an arc as if he had no bones. The green-faced fanged beast that was swung by Xiao Xian almost scratched the person's chest. However, one of the person's arms was not spared and was scratched by the fangs. According to the distance, even if it was a scratch, it was not a big wound. It was much less dangerous than being stabbed in the chest. However, the sudden pain from the wound on his arm made him pause when he landed on the ground. No. They had been through a lot. Most of the time, even without looking at the wound, they could guess what kind of wound it was. The size, depth, and how much blood would flow. However, what happened just now should have been a small wound. Why did it hurt so much? It was as if the wound had suddenly exploded. Before they could look, Xiao Xian swung his arm again and the person retreated. Their target was the green-faced fanged beast and it had to be alive. This was the condition set by the Shi family in Rock Hill City. Therefore, they could be merciless when they attacked Xiao Xian, but they still had to be careful when facing the green-faced fanged beast. This way, they would appear to be restrained and would not be able to use too much force. Xiao Xian also saw their concerns and continued to use the green-faced fanged beast as a weapon. Seeing that Xiao Xian actually used such a method, the two people cursed in their hearts. The Yinjiao people were really scheming. If Xiao Xian knew what they were thinking, he would definitely scoff. A thief who specialized in stealing other people's work had the nerve to talk about other people? Moreover, this was no longer stealing, this was a blatant robbery. Even more despicable. I've worked so hard to find this one. Do you think it was easy? You want to steal my prey? The green-faced fanged beast was completely used by Xiao Xian as a meteor hammer. Rumble. 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 Puff. One of them couldn't dodge in time, and his shoulder was pierced by the fangs of the green-faced beast. Although he tried his best to dodge, the fangs still pierced him half a finger deep. He had clearly avoided his vital parts and it shouldn't have been a big wound. However, the moment he was stabbed, his shoulder seemed to have exploded from the inside. Amidst the green woods and grasses, glaring blood splattered onto the branches, grass, and leaves, adding to the beauty of life and death in this verdant land. How could this be? It shouldn't be like this. Even if I was pricked, I shouldn't feel this way. It shouldn't be this painful. At this moment, the two of them did not plan to attack anymore. Instead, they retreated far away. They wanted to figure out what was going on first. Otherwise, they would not be able to feel at ease. Stealing the target was important, but it was not as important as their own lives. They didn't want to die here because of this thing, not even leaving behind a complete bone. Seeing the two of them retreat, Xiao Xian didn't continue fighting. He couldn't directly kill the two of them now. Besides, he had the green-faced fanged beast with him. He didn't know how Duo Kong and the others were doing, so it was better to run first. Pulling back the green-faced fanged beast, Xiao Xian grabbed the worm's silk on its body and carried it away. After Xiao Xian left, the two people who had been vigilant looked at the wound on their body. The person who was scratched on the arm found that there was a 2-finger-wide wound on his arm. The wound was deeper than he thought. His bones weren't hurt, but this unexpected wound made him feel a sense of danger. The green-faced fanged beast's fangs were strange. If he didn't avoid it, his chest would have been pierced. He would have been lying on the ground. The other person stared blankly at his injured shoulder. He couldn't believe that it was just a simple stab. In the past, he had also been stabbed by people with knives or spears, but he had never encountered such a situation. There was a wound on his shoulder that was almost penetrated. Blood was constantly flowing out from the wound. His bones weren't damaged at all, and his shoulder blade was intact. However, this wound that almost penetrated his entire shoulder made his hair stand on end. An indescribable cold numbness spread from the wound to his entire arm. Even his uninjured bones were trembling. On the other side, Xiao Xian carried the green-faced fanged beast and found a place to rest. Since someone was chasing him, he couldn't go back the way he came. Fortunately, when he was chasing the green-faced fanged beast, he had already memorized the general route. Based on this, he could deduce the location of the cave. After resting for a while, Xiao Xian finally had time to check on the green-faced fanged beast. After being used like a meteor hammer by Xiao Xian for a while, the green-faced fanged beast's eyes still looked awake. However, the anger and murderous intent in its eyes were getting stronger. Its nostrils were constantly breathing out hot steam like steam from a boiling pot. The grass on the ground that was facing its nostrils quickly withered and its color changed. It was as if it was put into a hot pot. When Xiao Xian carried it over, he found that its body temperature was high. However, seeing that it was still awake, Xiao Xian didn't understand. Could this be the special characteristic of the green-faced fanged beast? Looking carefully, Xiao Xian found that the green-faced fanged beast's round belly seemed to have shrunk a little. Xiao Xian stretched out his hand and pulled on the worm's silk. He was sure that the green-faced fanged beast had indeed lost weight. It had only been less than half an hour since it was blocked in the cave. In such a short time, it had changed so much. If it had rushed into the cave with its current appearance, it might not have been blocked in the cave. Probably because the green-faced fanged beast felt that the worm's silk was loosening, it struggled to break free. Xiao Xian quickly tightened the worm's silk again. In addition to these changes, Xiao Xian also found that there was a wound on its face. It was probably caused by the two robbers before. The wound wasn't big, it wasn't even as long as Xiao Xian's pinky finger, and it wasn't bleeding profusely. A drop of green blood flowed out from the wound and was thrown out by the struggling green-faced fanged beast. Xiao Xian saw the drop of blood that was thrown out was like a light feather that slowly fell to the ground. It wasn't something that a normal drop of water or blood could do. Xiao Xian walked over and looked at the drop of light green blood on the grass. Tiny bubbles began to appear on the edges of the blood droplet. Then, as if the blood droplet had been dropped into a hot and dry pot, it began to bubble even more violently. The bubbles also grew bigger. The blood droplet, however, seemed to evaporate. It quickly became smaller until there was no trace of it left. Xiao Xian stared blankly at the leaf. He turned it over and looked at it again. If he hadn't seen the drop of blood being thrown out and dripping here with his own eyes, Xiao Xian would have doubted what had happened here. He used to wonder why there were so many fearsome beasts in the world, but only a few types of beast blood could be used to make weapons. Why couldn't other beasts do the same? Xiao Xian used to be stupid enough to try using the prey that the hunting team brought back. Now, it seemed that the fearsome beasts that were chosen to be used to make weapons had their own unique characteristics. The green-faced fanged beast was very light, Xiao Xian was sure of that. But he didn't expect their blood to be so light. It was also very strange. In just a few breaths, it evaporated without leaving a trace. The green-faced fanged beast that was tied up again was breathing out air. In front of it, all the grass in the range of its breath withered. Moreover, its body was still shrinking. Now, it didn't look as round as it used to. The wound on its face had already scabbed and was recovering very quickly. Xiao Xian was guarding it. When he saw that it was almost done, he tightened the worm's silk again to prevent it from escaping. During the process, Xiao Xian also carefully avoided its fangs. When he saw the wounds on the two robbers, he knew that the fangs of the green-faced fanged beast were much more dangerous than he thought. When he thought about how he dared to grab it with his bare hands, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, he wasn't scratched by the fangs. The most lethal part of the beast was the fangs. If his hand was scratched, he didn't know what would have happened to his hand. No wonder the carcass of the beast that he saw that day was killed by the green-faced fanged beast's fangs. The fangs were strangely slippery, and the fangs had explosive lethality. It was indeed the strongest weapon of such a creature. Not to mention, it had incredible speed and a light body that could almost fly. It was definitely true that the most dangerous beast in this forest was the green-faced fanged beast. Xiao Xian was really lucky to be able to catch one so easily. If it hadn't eaten too much and was stuck at the entrance of the cave, Xiao Xian wouldn't have been able to catch it without any injuries. When the green-faced fanged beast's torso had shrunk to half its original size, Xiao Xian tightened the worm's silk and carried it back. Taking a detour, Xiao Xian took a long detour and found traces of the Hui tribesmen. There was an eagle flying in the sky, as if it was looking for something. Xiao Xian blew the wooden whistle in his mouth to attract the attention of the eagle in the sky. Seeing Xiao Xian, the man seemed to be relieved. Mai and Tua also heard the whistle and ran over from the forest. They were stopped by the Rock Hill City people. Some of them were injured, and one of the eagles couldn't fly because it was hit by an arrow, so they had already returned. They continued to look for Xiao Xian. Xiang Chen was injured. Duo Kong sent him back to the cave. Mai briefly told Xiao Xian what they encountered. "Are you okay?" Xiao Xian asked. "He's fine. It's not serious. He'll be fine after 2 days of rest." This is. Mai looked at the green-faced fanged beast that Xiao Xian was carrying. His eyes were filled with anticipation, as if he had guessed something but wasn't sure. "Yes, that's it." Chapter 549. Knowing that Xiao Xian had caught the green-faced fanged beast, Mai and Tua were so excited that their faces turned red. They couldn't wait to bring it back to their tribe to test if it really had magical properties. However, the other tribes wouldn't let the Yanjiao people go just like that. After all, they hadn't caught anything yet. Originally, Mai wanted the Hui tribe to bring Xiao Xian back. If they flew in the sky, it would be faster and there would be fewer obstacles. However, the giant mountain eagle didn't want to cooperate at all. As soon as Xiao Xian approached it with the green-faced fanged beast, it screamed and ran away. No matter how the Hui tribe tried to calm it down, it was useless. The giant mountain eagle had always been repulsed by this area. When it rested, it would fly to another place to rest. Now, it was even more repulsed by the green-faced fanged beast. In the end, Xiao Xian chose to go back with Mai and the others. On the way back, they met a group of people from Rock Hill City. However, Xiao Xian and the others didn't want to fight with them. They just wanted to bring the beast back to the cave as soon as possible. Therefore, they tried their best to avoid the group of people. They ran too fast and the group of slaves couldn't catch up to Xiao Xian and the others. Xiao Xian wrapped the green-faced fanged beast in leaves and vines, only exposing its nostrils and fangs. When the slaves saw this, they were only suspicious. They weren't sure, so they didn't chase after them. Ever since they came to this forest, the people from Rock Hill City and the tribesmen hadn't had any real conflicts. They were all saving their strength to look for the green-faced fanged beast. When Xiao Xian and the others went back to the cave, the slaves who went out to look for their target also went back. When the slaves returned to the village, they saw Shirshir sitting there with a gloomy face. His whole body was filled with an air of, "I'm not happy." None of the slaves dared to make a sound. They just stood there obediently with their heads down, waiting to be scolded. This was the norm for the past few days. "What did you find?" The veins on Shirshir's forehead bulged. His voice was as heavy as a heavy rock, about to crush anyone who heard it. The slaves, who stood there with their heads down, shrunk their necks and lowered their heads even more. Shirshir's gaze was as sharp as a knife as he scanned the group of people one by one. It was unclear if he was picking the first person to attack. On such a hot day, the tanned faces of the slaves standing there were full of sweat. When they became nervous, the sweat flowed faster. "Master, we met people from the tribe on our way back." The leader of the slaves braced himself under Shirshir's gaze and said, "There are people from the Hui tribe. As for the others, based on their totemic patterns, they should be from Yinjiao." As soon as they heard the name, Yinjiao, the two men beside Shirshir raised their eyebrows. One of them was Robber 4 whom Shirshir had met before, and the other was Robber 7 who had just arrived. Shirshir stared at the slave for 2 seconds before slowly saying, "Continue." Although Shirshir didn't show any intense emotions, those who knew him well knew that if they couldn't move him with what they said, they would be punished. The slave stuttered as he told the story, including his own guesses. He then quickly looked at Shirshir's face. Seeing Shirshir's bright eyes and relaxed expression, he knew he did the right thing this time. He might even be rewarded. He couldn't help but be secretly happy. Sure enough, after Shirshir heard the story, he also felt that the Yinjiao man was carrying the green-faced fanged beast. After he said, "Reward," he called for his men to come over. He planned to let the slaves continue their search in the area where the Yinjiao people were active. How was it? I was right, right? The ones who found the green-faced fanged beast first must be the Yinjiao people. Robber 7 jumped onto a wooden pile and sat down, crossing his legs. Robber 4 glanced at him. "You told them everything?" "Heh, if I didn't tell them so much, they might not have found it. It's all thanks to me that they were able to get news so quickly." Robber 7 didn't think there was anything wrong with telling the Yinjiao people about the green-faced fanged beast. Instead, he thought he had done something good. If it was a difficult target, of course, it was better to let others do it for him. He was only responsible for stealing. Robber 4 was about to say something when he suddenly frowned. Even Robber 7, who was proud of himself, was stunned. The two of them quickly left Rock Hill City's stronghold. They heard the other robbers calling for them. It was the two robbers who wanted to steal Xiao Xian's prey. After they returned, they told the other robbers about what happened to prevent others from experiencing the same thing. Although they usually acted alone, it was impossible to get the green-faced fanged beast with just one or two of them. They could only work together. While the robbers and the people of Rock Hill City started to act, Xiao Xian's group of people were crowded in the cave. They looked at the green-faced fanged beast that Xiao Xian brought back with envy and confusion. Why did the people of Rock Hill City look for such a fearsome beast? Some people had the idea of stealing it, but when they thought about the fighting power of the Yinjiao people and the situation in the forest, they temporarily gave up on the idea. It was impossible for there to be only one green-faced fanged beast in such a large forest. After the others asked Xiao Xian, they decided to follow Xiao Xian's route and search for it. Of course, Xiao Xian had already reminded them of the things they needed to pay attention to when facing the green-faced fanged beast. Whether they listened or not was their own business. Xiao Xian couldn't do anything about it. Xiao Xian also knew that the people of Rock Hill City should have guessed what he brought back. When he hid the beast, he didn't really expect to fool them. He was just dealing with the situation at the time. The slaves would definitely report this to their slave masters. After the slave masters guessed, they would also take action. I don't know if the people of Rock Hill City will come and steal it, Mai said. I'll go add a few more traps to prevent them from sneaking up the mountain. However, to the surprise of the robbers and the tribesmen, the people of Rock Hill City didn't steal the green-faced fanged beast that Xiao Xian caught. Instead, they brought people to the place where Xiao Xian caught the beast. Surprisingly, they did encounter one nearby. However, the green-faced fanged beast was too fast. In the end, it went into a cave. Shir sent people in, but not long after they entered, they heard a scream and blood spurting out. After that, there was no more sound. Since he couldn't send anyone in, Shir ordered his men to release smoke. They burned a lot of grass that emitted a strong pungent smell at the entrance of the cave and blew it into the cave. But in the end, they still couldn't force it out. They didn't know if there were other caves. Since they couldn't catch it, Shir ordered people to set up many traps around the area. Not only on that mountain, but also on the surrounding mountains. Xiao Xian had sneaked over to investigate before. Looking at the people of Rock Hill City, they were planning to go all out. Their goal wasn't one or two green-faced fanged beasts, but more. That was why they didn't steal the beasts from the tribesmen. Instead, they left people to make other arrangements. Bang! 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 The sound of knocking echoed in the forest. Shir wanted to use the sound to force out the beasts hiding in the mountains. Shir had no other choice. The records left by his ancestors only said that green-faced fanged beasts weren't easy to catch, but they didn't say that they were hard to find. The only reason he set up camp there was to catch more. But now, he couldn't even find one. If he kept searching like this, when could he go back? It had been almost 200 years since anyone came to catch them. Logically speaking, there should be more of them. Why couldn't he see them? You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.